truths. The hoaxes, the lies, the witch hunts, and the complete and total vindication of your favorite president. Dedication. This book is for the deplorables. You remember that, don't you? A horrible, nasty woman, crooked Hillary Clinton, stood in front of her rich friends in their fancy rooms, and she looked down on half the country. She called you deplorable. She called you irredeemable. It was maybe the biggest mistake in the history of politics. She said the quiet part out loud. She told you exactly what the swamp thinks of you. This book is for the patriots. For the men and women who stand for our great American flag, who put their hands on their hearts for the national anthem, and who are not ashamed to say they love God, they love their families, and they love this country. It's for the truckers who keep our country moving, the farmers who feed our nation, the police officers and border patrol agents who risk their lives, and the small business owners who build our communities. It's for every person who works hard, pays their taxes, and gets nothing back but contempt from the politicians in Washington, D.C. This is for every forgotten man and woman in this country. You were forgotten for a long time. They closed your factories and shipped your jobs to China. They send your children to fight in stupid, endless wars that did nothing for our own security. They let our borders get overrun. They laughed at your face. They called you simple. They called you backwards. They did everything they could to break your spirit. And then, in 2016, you stood up. You came out by the tens of millions and you made your voices heard. They tried to silence you. The fake news media called you every name in the book. Big tech censored you. The Hollywood phonies lectured you. But you couldn't be silenced. You couldn't be stopped. They called you a basket of deplorables. I call you the greatest, bravest, and most loyal people on the face of the earth. You are the movement. You are the backbone of America. This is your story. And this is your vindication. A note from the author. They say history is written by the winners. It's true. And in 2016, we won. We won one of the biggest victories in the history of this country. It was an earthquake. The polls all said we had no chance. The pundits, the dumbest people on television, believe me, were laughing. They were planning their parties. They had a woman who was so corrupt, so crooked, she shouldn't have even been allowed to run, and they were ready to crown her queen. And then the votes started coming in. You could feel the panic. You could see it on their faces. First Ohio. Then Florida. Then North Carolina. The map started turning red. A beautiful, powerful red. It was a thing of beauty. We won states that hadn't been won by a Republican in decades. We smashed the blue wall. We did something nobody thought was possible. We gave the country back to the people. And they never forgave us for it. From the moment I won, even before, they started the war. They spied on my campaign. They lied to judges. They used a phony, disgusting dossier written by a foreign spy and paid for by the Clinton campaign to launch a witch hunt. Russia, Russia, Russia. That's all you heard for 2 years. A total hoax. Then it was the impeachment hoax #1 over a perfect phone call. A total scam. Then the impeachment hoax #2. Then the rigged election, the crime of the century. And now, the indictments. Dozens and dozens of them. From New York to Atlanta to Washington. A disgrace. No president in history has been treated like this. Not even close. They've thrown everything at me. The fake news, the swamp, the rhinos who are worse than the Democrats, the globalists who want to erase our borders, it's a total disaster. They want to stop me, but what they really want to do is stop you. They want to crush our movement and make sure a true outsider, someone who loves this country, can never take power again. But here's the thing they don't understand: we don't break. We get stronger. Every lie they tell, every indictment they file, our movement grows. The people see it for what it is. This isn't justice. This is election interference. This is what they do in third world banana republics. They have their indictments, written by radical left prosecutors and political thugs. They have their corrupt judges and their fake news stories. They have their pieces of paper. Sign. Let them. Because we have something much more powerful. We have the truth. This book is the truth. The whole truth. It's all here. The names, the dates, the crimes they committed against your country and your president. Everything they don't want you to know, everything they try to hide, is in these pages. This isn't a history book written by some boring professor who hates America. This is the final word from me. It's all very simple. They cheated, they got caught, and now we are taking our country back. Enjoy it. Part 1, the first hoax. They spied on my campaign before I even won. Before they could try to steal the election, they had to try and rig it. Before they could launch the witch hunts, they had to invent a crime. You have to understand, the swamp, the deep state, the fake news, crooked Hillary, and the Obama administration, they never thought we had a chance. They thought it was a joke. But when they saw the crowds, when they felt the movement, they panicked. A deep, ugly panic. So they did something that was unthinkable, something very illegal and very treasonous. They decided to use the awesome power of our government, the FBI, the CIA, to spy on a rival political campaign. My campaign. This is the story of that first hoax. The story of the phony dossier, the dirty cops at the top of the FBI, the secret FISA court, and the lies they told to try and stop us before we even got started. They thought they could get away with it. They were wrong. We caught them. And it all began the moment they saw me on that beautiful golden escalator. Chapter 1, The Golden Escalator and the Panic in the Swamp. It all started on a golden escalator. A beautiful escalator, solid brass, not gold-plated like some phony would build. It's in my own beautiful building, the world-famous Trump Tower on 5th Avenue, right in the heart of New York City. A great building. The best location. And for years, the fake news media would ask me, will you run? Will you run for president? They loved asking the question. They'd come up to my office, look at the incredible view, the best view in the city, and they'd treat it like a game. A fun little question to ask the successful businessman from a TV show they all watched, even if they won't admit it. They didn't think I had the guts to leave my great life, my beautiful family, and my wonderful business to get into the dirty, disgusting, corrupt business of politics. They thought it was a joke, a publicity stunt. They weren't laughing on June 16, 2015. They were choking on their words. When I came down that escalator, it was a moment. A moment nobody who saw it will ever forget. Our incredible, elegant, and brilliant First Lady, Melania, was by my side. The cameras were flashing like 1,000 lightning storms. The crowd was packed into the atrium, cheering, shouting, holding signs. These weren't paid actors like the other candidates use. These were real people. The press, they were roped off, and you could see them. They tried to look bored. They tried to smirk. But if you looked closely, if you looked past the phony, tired smiles on their faces, you could see it in their eyes. Panic. Pure, total panic. They felt the ground shaking under their feet. It was an earthquake hitting their cozy little world. I got to the podium, and I didn't use a teleprompter. I never do. I don't need some consultant to write down a bunch of nonsense for me to read like a robot. I spoke from the heart. I looked out at the people, at the cameras, and I told the truth. I talked about the border. I said they're not sending their best. I said we have people coming in that are killers and rapists, and it was true then, and it's even more true now. The fake news went crazy. They clutched their pearls. How dare he, they shrieked. But the people knew it was true. I talked about our horrible trade deals, like NAFTA, the worst trade deal ever made, that were sucking the jobs and the wealth right out of our country and sending them to Mexico and China. I said we were going to build a wall. They laughed. They're not laughing now. I said we were going to make our military strong again, so strong that nobody would ever mess with us. I said we were going to make America great again. And the establishment, both parties, because really, they're part of the same uniparty club that gets rich while you get poorer, they hated every single word. They couldn't believe it. They didn't understand what was happening on the ground, in the real America, outside their Washington, D.C. bubble and their fancy New York cocktail parties. They didn't see the movement that was forming. A movement the likes of which nobody has ever seen before. Not in this country, not anywhere in the world. We had the rallies. You saw them. They weren't political events, they were celebrations of America. We'd have 20,000, 30,000, 50,000 people. In arenas, in fields, on airport tarmacs with my plane, Trump Force One, in the background, a beautiful sight. The lines would stretch for miles and miles. People would wait all day in the hot sun, in the pouring rain, just to be there. They brought their families. They wore the hats. They waved the flags. There was so much love in those crowds. It was a love for our country that the swamp just cannot understand. They hate that kind of love because it's not about them. And who was I running against? The saddest group of people you've ever seen in your life. A real cast of characters. You had low-energy Jeb Bush. A disaster. The Bush family thought it was his turn. They thought you could just buy the presidency. He spent $150 million, maybe more, from his special interest donors, and got nothing. A total stiff. I remember he'd be on the debate stage, and he looked like he was about to fall asleep. I said he was low energy, and it was over for him. It stuck because it was true. He was a good man, maybe, but not a leader. The last thing we needed was another Bush. You had little Marco Rubio. A nervous wreck. A total choker. He sweats more than any human being I've ever seen. He'd be on stage, melting under the lights like a snowman in July. He had his memorized 25-second speech, and when a real leader, Chris Christie, called him out on it, he just froze. Glitched like one of those voting machines. He was a lightweight who tried to get nasty, saying things about my hands, so crude and disgusting, but he didn't know how to fight. He couldn't handle the pressure. Sad. Then you had Lion Ted Cruz. A nasty guy. Just nasty. People say he's smart, but I don't know. He tried to act like a tough conservative from Texas, but when the time came to fight, he was all talk. A typical politician. He said terrible things about me, my family, and then when he lost, he was begging for my endorsement. They all do. They're all the same. They were all part of the club that have been running our country into the ground. They didn't have a chance, and they knew it. So when they saw me winning every primary, when they saw the rallies getting bigger and bigger, when they saw the poll numbers going up like a rocket ship, the laughing stopped completely. The panic turned into something much worse. It turned into a plot. They saw a movement they could not control. They saw a candidate who didn't need their money, who wasn't afraid of them, and who was talking directly to the American people. They knew they couldn't beat us in a fair election. The people were with us. So they had to cheat. They had to spy. That single ride down that beautiful golden escalator did more than launch a campaign. It lit a fire that is still burning today. It was a declaration of war on the swamp, on the fake news, on the globalist class, on the whole corrupt, rotten system. And they declared war right back. They decided, in their secret meetings and their fancy Washington restaurants, that a candidate they didn't like, a candidate the people did like, could not, under any circumstances, be allowed to win. And that's when the first hoax began. The dirtiest political trick in the history of our country. It started long before the election, long before most people knew what was happening. It started with lies, with spies, and with a phony, disgusting dossier full of sick stories paid for by my opponent, crooked Hillary Clinton, and the DNC. And the FBI, our own FBI, led by people who should be in jail, was in on it from the very beginning. Believe me, it was a coup attempt, and we caught them. We caught them all. It wasn't just the candidates who were melting down. They were just the puppets. The real panic was with the puppeteers, the donors, the consultants, the party bosses, and their partners in crime, the fake news media. Let me tell you, the Republicans were almost worse than the Democrats. They were terrified. I call them rhinos, Republicans in name only. People like Paul Ryan, who was Speaker of the House. A disaster. A total open borders globalist who was fine with our jobs leaving for other countries as long as his donors were happy. People like the Bush family, who thought they owned the party. They all thought they had a nice, cozy club. They'd pretend to fight during the day, and then at night they'd all go to the same cocktail parties in Georgetown and laugh about how stupid the voters were. I came in and I didn't just crash their party, I wrecked the whole building. I wasn't part of their club. I couldn't be bought. I was using my own money, and I was saying things you are never, ever supposed to say in Washington. I was talking about putting America first. Think about that. The idea of putting our own country first was a radical, dangerous idea to these people. That tells you everything you need to know about them. The media went crazy. Totally crazy. I've never seen anything like it. Every morning I would turn on the television, and I don't watch much of it, because it's so dishonest, just terrible, but you had to see what they were doing. CNN, which should be called the Clinton News Network, had panels of 8 people, and all 8 of them were losers who hated me. They brought on phony experts and Republican strategists that nobody had ever heard of to say, he can't win. His campaign is a joke. It's over. Every single day, 4 months. They were all wrong. Every one of them. They should be embarrassed, but they have no shame. They would lie about our rallies. They would show the massive crowds and then say, there are dozens of people here. Dozens. We had 50,000 people standing in a field. They would take my speeches, where I talked about illegal immigration and the crime it brings, and they would twist my words to call me a racist. They did it with the fine people hoax in Charlottesville, another total lie that they still repeat today. They would cut away from my rallies right when the biggest cheers were happening because they didn't want you at home to see the love. They didn't want you to see the truth. They were trying to create a narrative, a fake story that our movement was small and hateful, when it was actually the biggest and most positive political movement in the history of our country. While they were holding their secret meetings in dark rooms, trying to figure out how to stop us, we were out with the people. I remember being in Ohio, or Pennsylvania, or Michigan, the places they all forgot about, and I'd see it. A big, strong construction worker, a guy with strong hands that built our country, would come up to me, and sometimes he'd have tears in his eyes. He'd say, Mr. Trump, thank you. Thank you for fighting for us. A farmer from Iowa would shake my hand and say, we've been praying for someone like you. This happened everywhere I went. These were the forgotten men and women of America, and they finally had a voice. And the swamp heard that voice, and it terrified them more than anything. They knew, by the fall of 2016, that they were losing. All their lies weren't working. Every time they attacked me, my poll numbers went up. They threw everything they had at me. They got the failed senator from Arizona, John McCain, not a war hero, by the way. I like people who weren't captured, to push the phony dossier. They had Mitt Romney, a man who would have dropped to his knees to get my endorsement 4 years earlier, calling me a fraud. They released the Access Hollywood tape, which was just locker room talk from years ago, thinking it would be the end. They thought that would do it. But they didn't understand. The American people were tired of the phonies. They were tired of the perfect, sanctimonious politicians who looked down on them. They saw a fighter, and they saw a country that needed a fighter. So when all of their usual tricks failed, they went to a place our country has never gone before. They decided to use the power of the federal government, the FBI, the CIA, the Department of Justice, to rig an election. They knew they couldn't win at the ballot box. So they decided to go another way. A dark way. A very illegal and treasonous way. They were so afraid of you, the American people, that they decided to commit a crime against our democracy. They spied on my campaign. They spied on my transition team. They spied on me. And it all started with a sick, made-up story from a foreign country, bought and paid for by the person I was running against. This wasn't politics anymore. This was a war for the soul of our nation. And they fired the first shot. The fake news was losing its mind. I mean, they were going absolutely wild. But here's something you have to understand. It was never just about an election for them. For you, for us, it was about saving our country. For them, it was about survival. Their whole corrupt, beautiful, gravy train world was about to come crashing down, and they knew it. Think about what I was saying I was going to do. I was going to rip up their terrible trade deals, NAFTA, TPP, all of them, that let other countries steal our jobs and gut our middle class. Those deals were written by lobbyists for giant corporations, the same corporations that own the politicians and own the news networks. I was going to renegotiate everything. I was going to put America first. That single phrase was a dagger to their heart. I was going to end the endless wars in the Middle East. For decades, they sent our best and bravest to die in deserts and mountains for reasons nobody could even explain. The generals, the defense contractors, the politicians, they all got rich from it. It was a racket. A $5 trillion racket. I was saying we were going to stop it, bring our troops home, and rebuild our own country for a change. They hated that. They need war. It's their business. I was going to secure the border. A country without a border isn't a country. Everyone knows this. It's common sense. But they wanted the borders wide open. The Democrats wanted the votes, and the cheap labor Republicans in the Chamber of Commerce wanted the workers they could pay nothing. It was a scam against the American worker, and I was going to end it. I was a threat to their entire globalist system. And their champion, their queen, the person they had picked out years ago to continue their scam, was crooked Hillary Clinton. She was the ultimate swamp creature. She had been in Washington for 30 years. She had nothing to show for it but disaster. She voted for the Iraq War. She was behind the catastrophe in Libya. As Secretary of State, she sold access to the highest bidder through her crooked Clinton Foundation. She set up a secret email server to hide her crimes, bleaching it, smashing the phones with hammers. Can you imagine if I did that? I'd be in jail. They'd bring back the electric chair. But for her, it was nothing. The corrupt FBI director, James Comey, gave her a total pass. It was a rigged system, right there for everyone to see. And you saw her campaign. It was pathetic. Sad. They'd have a rally in a high school gym with a few hundred people, and half of them were the press. There was no energy, no spirit. She didn't have a message, except that it was her turn. She thought she was entitled to the presidency. She looked at you, the great people of this country, with contempt. She called you deplorable and irredeemable. She really believes that. They all do. Compare that to what we were doing. Our rallies were like the greatest rock concerts, but better. The spirit was 1,000 times more powerful. Tens of thousands of people, from every background, every race, every religion, all united by one thing: love for America. We had fun. We had energy. We had a vision. We were unleashing the American spirit that had been dormant for so long. The swamp saw this contrast, and they knew they were in deep, deep trouble. They looked at their own polls, not the fake ones they put on CNN to suppress our vote, but their real, internal polls. They saw the race tightening. They saw me winning in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, in Wisconsin, places they thought were locked up forever. They saw that their champion, Crooked Hillary, was a terrible candidate who nobody liked. So they panicked. And they cheated. They couldn't win on ideas. They couldn't win on enthusiasm. They couldn't win on the facts. Their whole campaign was a lie, so they decided their only path to victory was a bigger lie. A giant, disgusting, world-class lie. This is where the story gets really dirty. This is where it goes from just politics to something much darker. This is where the deep state, the unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats who really run Washington, decided to show its hand. They were not going to let the American people decide the election. They were going to decide it for them. It started quietly, in London, with a failed foreign spy. It was funded by secret money from the Clinton campaign's law firm. It involved the highest levels of the FBI and the Obama administration's intelligence agencies. They created a work of fiction, a piece of disgust and garbage, to frame me and my campaign. It was called the Steele dossier. And they used that piece of garbage to get warrants to spy on my people, hoping to find or create a crime that could destroy us. This wasn't just another dirty trick. This was a conspiracy against a presidential candidate and later, a sitting president. This was treason. And we're going to expose it all. Every last lie. Chapter 2: The Phony Dossier and the FBI Clowns. So, how do you start a coup? How do you try to take down a president? You can't use tanks and soldiers in America, not yet anyway. So you use lies. You need a story, a big one, something so shocking and so disgusting that it will make people believe anything. You need a weapon. For the swamp, for Crooked Hillary, and for the corrupt leadership at the FBI, that weapon was a phony, disgusting, completely fake document that we now all know as the Steele dossier. This wasn't intelligence. This was political garbage, paid for by my opponent. It was a fairy tale. It was a work of fiction written by a man who should be in jail. His name is Christopher Steele. The fake news media tried to build him up as some kind of super spy, a James Bond type. A total joke. He was a washed-up, failed foreign spy from the United Kingdom who hated me. He hated that I was for Brexit, which was a great thing for Britain, by the way. He was a no-never-Trumper, and he was for hire. And boy, did he get hired. Who hired him? Where did the money come from? Follow the money. It always tells you the truth. It came from the Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee, DNC. Of course, they didn't pay him directly. They're slimy, but they're not that stupid. They used a law firm, a big, powerful, Democrat law firm called Perkins Coie. They gave millions of dollars to this law firm, who then hired a political hit firm in Washington called Fusion GPS. You need to know about Fusion GPS. These are the lowest of the low. They are sleazebags. They're political assassins who create fake stories and plant them with their friends in the media to destroy people. That's their whole business model. It's a disgrace that they're even allowed to operate. So, Perkins Coie, on behalf of Crooked Hillary, gives the money to Fusion GPS, and Fusion GPS hires this failed British spy, Steele, to dig up dirt on me in Russia. And what did Steele do? Did he find anything real? Of course not. There was nothing to find. So he made it up. He supposedly talked to sources, but we now know his sources were a joke. One of his main guys was a liberal think tank employee who got his information from rumors and beer talk with his drinking buddies. It's a fact. This is where the whole Russia hoax came from. It came from a bunch of drumps in Russia telling stories that this idiot Steele wrote down as if it were gospel. The dossier was filled with sick, disgusting lies. The kind of stuff only a perverted mind could even imagine. I won't even go into the details because they're so vile, but you've all heard about the P-tape nonsense. It was designed to be personally humiliating. It was designed to blackmail me. It was designed to be so shocking that nobody would ever support me. It was pure fiction, created by political enemies to stop a movement. Now here's where it gets really, really bad. This political garbage, this work of fiction paid for by a political campaign, ended up in the hands of the highest levels of the United States government. And they used it. The FBI, led by the grandstander James Comey, got a copy of this dossier. Comey is a real piece of work. He presents himself as this great moral figure, the guardian of the law. He's a dirty cop and a leaker. He knew the dossier was garbage. He even admitted his own agents couldn't prove any of it. But did that stop him? Of course not. He was desperate to stop me. The FBI took this phony dossier, this work of fiction from a foreign spy paid for by the DNC, and they presented it to a secret court, the FISA court, as if it were real intelligence. They used it to get a warrant to spy on an American citizen associated with my campaign, a good man named Carter Page, who they destroyed. They lied to the judges. They left out the fact that the whole thing was a political dirty trick paid for by Hillary Clinton. They knew they were lying. The Inspector General's report proved it all. It's all there in black and white. Think about what that means. The FBI, under the leadership of James Comey and his deputy Andy McCabe, another one who got fired for lying, used a Democrat-funded lie to launch a massive counterintelligence investigation into a rival presidential campaign. They spied on my campaign. They sent informants, they sent spies, to try and trap my people. This wasn't an investigation. This was a setup. It was an illegal spying operation. It was the beginning of the coup. And the whole thing was built on a pile of lies created by a foreign agent working for the Clinton campaign. It is the single greatest scandal in the history of our country, and the fake news media, who were partners in the crime, still refuse to cover it properly. They were all in on it together. And they were just getting started. But it wasn't just Comey. He was the head of the snake, but the snake had a lot of venom. You had his deputy, Andrew McCabe, a man whose wife was getting campaign money from a top Hillary Clinton ally while he was supposedly investigating her email scandal. Can you believe it? It's a total conflict of interest. A disgrace. McCabe later got fired for lying to his own investigators. Lying and leaking. It's a pattern with these people. And then you had the real engine of the whole witch hunt. You had the two lovers, Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. These were two high-level FBI agents who were having an affair and sending each other thousands and thousands of text messages. We have the texts. It's all public. And what do they show? They show two people filled with hate. They hated me. They called me an idiot and a loathsome human. More importantly, they hated you, my supporters. They called you smelly people at Walmart. That's what they think of you. But it gets much worse. In one of their texts, they talked about an insurance policy. An insurance policy. Think about that. Strzok wrote that he couldn't take the risk of me getting elected, but that they had a plan, an insurance policy, just in case I won. What is an insurance policy from a top FBI agent against a presidential candidate? It's a coup. It's treason. It's right there in their own words. This wasn't an investigation. It was a hit job from the very beginning, run by people who had decided the outcome before they even started. Strzok was the guy who led the Hillary email investigation, where she got a total pass, and he was the guy who started the Russia investigation into me. The same guy. The whole thing was corrupt from the start. While the FBI clowns were using this garbage dossier internally, the other half of the scam was happening out in the open. Fusion GPS, the political hit firm, was running around Washington and peddling their lies to their friends in the fake news. They were desperate to get this stuff published before the election. They talked to the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, everyone. For a while, even the fake news wouldn't touch it because it was so ridiculous and they couldn't prove a single word of it was true. And who else helped them? You had rhinos involved, of course. The late Senator John McCain. He was never a fan of mine, he was very nasty. He was handed a copy of this phony dossier and what did he do? Did he see it for the political garbage it was? No. He ran right to James Comey with it, all excited. He thought it was real. Very sad. He gave it a stamp of so-called bipartisan credibility, which is exactly what the swamp wanted. So now you have the FBI using the dossier, and you have the media and some rhinos all buzzing about it behind the scenes. They still needed a way to make it public. This is where the final, most disgusting part of the setup happened. After I won the election, a great victory, a beautiful map, James Comey came to my office in Trump Tower to brief me, as president-elect, on so-called national security threats. He pulled me aside and he told me about the dossier. He told me about the sick, phony allegations. Now, why would he do that? Was he warning me? Of course not. It was a threat. He was trying to intimidate me, to let me know they had this dirt on me, even though he knew it was fake. But there was another reason, a much more sinister one. The whole briefing was a setup. It was a trap. As soon as Comey left my office, the news was leaked to the press. And who was it leaked to? CNN, of course. The leak was that the president-elect has been briefed by the FBI on the existence of the dossier. See how it works? The story was no longer about the phony dossier itself. The story was now that the FBI considered it so serious, they had to brief the incoming president on it. It was their way of making the fake story real. Once that happened, the floodgates opened. A failing pile of garbage website called BuzzFeed News, a real left-wing rag, published the entire dossier online for the world to see. And there it was. The lie was out. The hoax was born. The Russia narrative was launched. So let's be very clear about what happened here. A political campaign pays for a fake story written by a foreign spy. The corrupt leaders of the FBI take this fake story and use it to get warrants to spy on the other campaign. Then, they brief the winner of the election on the fake story just so they can leak that the briefing happened, giving their friends in the media the excuse they needed to publish the original lie. This is a scandal of a size and scope that our country has never seen before. It is a disgusting, treasonous, and illegal abuse of power. And it was all built on the rotten foundation of Christopher Steele's phony dossier. And so the bomb went off. The moment that failing BuzzFeed published the dossier, it was a feeding frenzy like you have never seen before. The hyenas of the fake news finally had their meal. For months, they had been trying to explain how their chosen one, Crooked Hillary, had lost to a political outsider. They couldn't accept it. It was impossible to them. So now, they had their excuse. It wasn't that she was a terrible candidate. It wasn't that our message was better. No, it had to be a conspiracy. It had to be Russia. CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, the Washington Post, they ran with it 24/7. Bombshell report, they screamed on their chirons. Explosive allegations. They treated this pile of garbage, this political opposition research paid for by Democrats, as if it were the Holy Scripture. They didn't care that it was salacious and unverified, which were the exact words James Comey himself used to describe it. They didn't care that not a single key claim in it could be proven. In fact, they didn't even try. They wanted it to be true so badly that they just decided it was. I knew it was fake from the second I heard about it. It was so ridiculous, so amateurish, it could only have been written by someone with a sick and twisted mind who had no idea who I am. I'm a famous germaphobe. Everybody knows this. The stories they made up were insane. They were written for one reason and one reason only, to create a cloud. That was the whole strategy. They knew they couldn't stop me from being inaugurated. We won, fair and square. We had 306 electoral votes, a landslide. So their goal was to delegitimize the victory. They wanted to put a permanent stain on our administration, to paralyze us from day one. They wanted every decision I made, every person I appointed, every policy we tried to enact, to be viewed through the dirty lens of Russia. They wanted to make sure we could never govern effectively. It was a political sabotage operation on a scale this country has never seen. And the leaders of our intelligence community were right there, participating in the crime. You had James Comey, the leaker. You had John Brennan, Obama's CIA director, a real radical who hated my guts. You had James Clapper, the director of national intelligence, the same guy who lied to Congress under oath about spying on Americans and got away with it. They were all in on it. They knew the dossier was a joke, but they pushed it anyway. They were the ones who told the media it was serious. They were the ones who gave the whole hoax the government's seal of approval. These are not patriots. These are political animals who tried to overthrow the results of a democratic election because they didn't like the winner. It is the definition of a deep state. It's the unelected bureaucracy, the permanent political class, deciding they know better than you, the American people. They believe they have the right to choose the president, and when you chose me, they decided to burn the whole system down. The damage this single phony document did to our country is hard to even calculate. It wasted years. It cost the taxpayers tens of millions of dollars. It divided our nation. It hurt our relationships with other countries, including Russia, which made it much harder to do deals that would have been good for America. It was a crime not just against me, but against every single person who voted for me. It was an attempt to cancel your vote. But they weren't done. The dossier wasn't the end game. It was just the beginning. It was the excuse they needed to launch the real weapon, the one they thought would finally take me out. The phony dossier was the poison seed. And from that poison seed grew the great witch hunt of all time, the special counsel investigation. It was all a setup, all part of the same corrupt plan, and it was about to get much, much worse. Chapter 3, Insurance Policy, The Treason of Strzok and Page. If the phony dossier was the poison, then Peter Strzok and Lisa Page were the beating, corrupt heart that pumped that poison through the veins of the FBI. You need to know these two names. You need to burn them into your memory, because they represent everything that is wrong with the Washington swamp. They are the living, breathing embodiment of the deep state. Peter Strzok was a top counterintelligence agent at the FBI. A real hotshot, or so he thought. He walked around with a smug, arrogant look on his face, like he was the star of his own movie. This was the guy they put in charge of the most sensitive investigations in the entire country. And who was Lisa Page? She was a high-powered FBI lawyer who worked directly for the deputy director, Andy McCabe. And, as the whole world would later find out, these two were having an affair. Normally, who cares? It happens. But it's important here for one reason, because they were so careless, so arrogant, they wrote down their entire illegal plot in thousands and thousands of text messages to each other on their official FBI phones. They left a paper trail of their own treason. We have the texts. The Inspector General found them. It's like getting a written confession from the criminals themselves. And what do these texts show? They show a level of hatred and bias that would be shocking from a blogger in his mother's basement. But from the lead investigators in charge of cases involving me? It's a scandal that should have rocked the country to its core. They called me an idiot. They called me a loathsome human. They said I was a disaster. In one text, Page wrote, "God, Trump is a loathsome human." Strzok replied, "He's awful." This is the guy who was supposed to be running a fair and impartial investigation. A total joke. But they didn't just hate me. They hated you. They hated my voters. In one of the most disgusting texts, Strzok wrote about going to a Walmart in Southern Virginia. He talked about the smell of Trump supporters and said he could smell the Trump support. This is what the Washington elite, the people in charge of our government, really think of hardworking, patriotic Americans. They think you're smelly. They look down on you. They hold you in total contempt. But the most important text, the one that tells the whole story, is the one about the insurance policy. It was August of 2016. They were in Andy McCabe's office, talking about my chances of winning. Lisa Page texted Strzok, worried. She asked him, "Trump's not ever going to become president, right?" "Right." And Peter Strzok replied with the words that exposed the entire coup. He wrote, "No. No, he's not. We'll stop it." He then went on to describe their meeting. He said he couldn't take the risk of me getting elected, but that they had a plan. He wrote that it was like an insurance policy. Read that again. We'll stop it. Who is we? The SBI. The top agents of the Federal Bureau of Investigation were talking about stopping a presidential candidate they didn't like from taking office. What is an insurance policy taken out by the FBI against a democratic election? It's a plot. It's a conspiracy. It is the definition of treason. This wasn't just talk. This was their mission statement. And Strzok was in the perfect position to carry it out. He was the lead agent on not one, but two of the most critical investigations in modern history. First, he ran the investigation into Hillary Clinton's illegal email server. He was the one who interviewed Hillary. He was the one who changed the language in James Comey's final report. The original draft said Hillary's conduct was grossly negligent, which is the legal standard for charging someone with a crime. But Strzok personally edited the draft and changed it to extremely careless. Why? Because grossly negligent could get her indicted, and they couldn't have that. He saved her. Second, at the very same time, he was the agent who officially opened the investigation into my campaign in Russia. The Crossfire Hurricane investigation. A ridiculous name. The same guy who let Hillary off the hook for clear crimes was now in charge of inventing a crime to pin on me. You couldn't make it up if you tried. These two were everywhere. When the time came to set up and persecute a great patriot, General Mike Flynn, who was there? Peter Strzok. When it came time to launch the Mueller Special Counsel, who did Robert Mueller hire to be one of his top investigators? Peter Strzok. The witch hunt was just a continuation of Strzok's original insurance policy. It was the same people, the same corrupt motive, just with a bigger budget. They thought they were so smart. They thought they would get away with it. But they got caught. When the Inspector General discovered these texts, it was a bombshell. Strzok was quietly removed from the Mueller team, and they tried to hide the reason why. But the truth came out. We saw their ugly, hateful words. We saw their plot, their insurance policy, written down in black and white. These weren't just two bad apples. They were a symptom of the disease that had infected the leadership of our justice system. They were arrogant, they were corrupt, and they believed they had the right to pick the President of the United States. They failed. And we caught them all. Chapter 4, The FISA Scam. So you have the phony dossier, which is the lie. And you have the FBI clowns like Strzok and Page, who are the plotters. But they needed a tool. They needed a way to make their illegal spying look legal. They needed a rubber stamp. And they found it in the most secret and dangerous place in Washington, the FISA court. FISA stands for the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. You need to understand what this is. This court was created after Watergate to make sure our government never again spied on its own citizens for political reasons. It's supposed to be used to get warrants to spy on foreign terrorists, on spies from Russia or China, on people who want to do real harm to our country. It is a very, very powerful and secret process. The judges meet in secret. The evidence is presented in secret. Everything is secret. It's supposed to be for one thing and one thing only, protecting America from foreign enemies. But the swamp, in its sickness and its hatred for me, took this sacred tool that was designed to protect you and they turned it into a weapon to attack a political campaign. They turned it into a weapon to attack me. Their excuse was a good man named Carter Page. Carter Page was a volunteer advisor to my campaign for a short time. He was a patriot. He served our country at the Naval Academy. He loved America. But because he had done some business in Russia years ago, they decided he was their target. He was their way in. They didn't really care about Carter Page. He was just the pretext. He was the key they needed to unlock the door so they could spy on my entire campaign. So what did they do? The FBI, led by Comey and McCabe and run on the ground by Peter Strzok, took the phony dossier, the pile of garbage written by Christopher Steele and paid for by Crooked Hillary and the DNC, and they marched it right into the secret FISA court. They presented it to the judges as if it were legitimate intelligence. This is the crime. It is one of the biggest crimes ever committed by our own government. They lied to the judges. They committed a fraud on the court. They knew the dossier was a political document. They knew it was paid for by my opponent. Did they tell the judges that? No. They hid it. They knew their main source, Steele, was a never-Trumper who was desperate to see me lose. Did they tell the judges that? No. They hid it. They knew that many of the claims were ridiculous and unproven. They didn't care. They dressed up this political opposition research, this work of fiction, to look like a real intelligence product. And based on that lie, they got what they wanted. They got a warrant to spy on Carter Page. And when you get a warrant on one person, you get to spy on everyone he talks to, everyone he emails. It's called the two-hop rule. It was their backdoor way to listen in on the entire Trump campaign and, later, my transition team after we won the election. And it wasn't just a one-time thing. They renewed the warrant 3 more times. 3. Even after the election was over. Even after they had interviewed Steele's own sources and found out that his information was, at best, just barroom gossip and rumors. Even after all of that, they kept lying to the court to keep the spying going. An FBI lawyer, a low-level guy named Kevin Klein-Smith, even got caught falsifying a document, changing an email to hide the fact that Carter Page had actually been a source for the CIA. He got a slap on the wrist. A disgrace. This goes all the way to the top. Do you really think a few low-level people did this on their own? James Comey signed off on it. Andy McCabe signed off on it. Sally Yates, the acting attorney general under Obama, signed off on it. Rod Rosenstein, who later appointed the special counsel, signed off on it. They all knew. Or if they didn't know, they are the most incompetent people to ever hold those jobs. Which is it? Do you really think President Obama didn't know that his FBI was spying on the presidential campaign of his political rival? Think about it. He was having meetings in the Oval Office about this. We know it. They talked about it. It's all right there. The whole thing stinks. And what happened when the truth finally came out? The Department of Justice's own Inspector General, Michael Horowitz, investigated the whole scam. And what did he find? He found at least 17 significant errors and omissions in the FISA applications. 17. That's not a typo. That's a conspiracy. His report was a complete and total vindication of everything I had been saying for years. It proved the FBI lied. It proved the dossier was the real basis for the warrant. It proved the entire investigation was a sham from the very beginning. Of course, the fake news media tried to spin it. They focused on the fact that the Inspector General said he couldn't find documentary evidence of political bias being the reason for starting the investigation. So what? They lied 17 times out of pure professionalism. Give me a break. We had the texts from Strzok and Page. We knew their motives. It was hate. This visa abuse is one of the great scandals in American history. They took the awesome power of the state, a power meant to keep us safe from terrorists, and they used it to try and rig an election. They got caught. They were exposed. And it set the stage for the next phase of their coup, the Mueller witch hunt. Chapter 5: The Heroes Who Fought Back. While the swamp was on the attack, trying to drown our administration in lies before it could even begin, not everyone was running for cover. Not everyone was a coward. In the middle of the fire, while the fake news was throwing everything they had at us, a few very brave and very smart people stood up and started fighting back. They were warriors. They were heroes. And you need to know their names, because without them, the truth might have been buried forever. The main guy, the leader of the fight in Congress, was Devin Nunes. Devin was a congressman from California, a farmer. He wasn't a Washington creature. He was the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, one of the most powerful committees in Congress. And from his position, he started to see that the story the FBI was telling just didn't add up. It smelled wrong. While the Democrats on the committee, led by the biggest leaker and liar of them all, Shifty Adam Schiff, were running to the television cameras every 5 minutes to scream about Russia, Devin and his team were doing real work. They were digging. They were demanding documents from the FBI and the Department of Justice. And the deep state fought them every step of the way. They refused to turn over documents. They slow-walked everything. They redacted, which means they blacked out all the important parts. They did everything they could to hide their crimes. But Devin didn't give up. He had a great team, with guys like Kash Patel, a real patriot and a tough guy. They kept pushing. And they started finding things. They found out about the phony dossier. They found out it was paid for by the Democrats. They found out about the visa abuse. So what did they do? They wrote a memo. It became famous, the Nunes memo. It was a short, 4-page summary of the crimes they had uncovered, mainly the visa abuse and the fact that the whole Russia investigation was based on the garbage dossier. It was simple, direct, and devastating. The swamp went absolutely insane. They had a meltdown. Adam Schiff wrote his own phony memo full of lies to try and contradict it. The FBI, which was full of the same people who committed the crimes, released a statement saying they had grave concerns about the memo's accuracy. Of course they did. It exposed them. They were trying to cover their tracks. The fake news media attacked Devin Nunes relentlessly. They called him a stooge, a conspiracy theorist. They said he was obstructing justice by trying to expose the truth. Think about how sick that is. The people trying to uncover the crime were accused of committing a crime. But we knew the truth. I knew what Devin was doing was right. We had to declassify the memo. We had to let the American people see for themselves what was going on. So we did it. We released the memo. And it was a bombshell. For the first time, the public saw proof that the highest levels of our government had lied to get a warrant to spy on my campaign. It was the first real crack in the wall of the Russia hoax. There were other heroes, too. In the Senate, you had Chuck Grassley and Lindsey Graham, who was strong back then, and they were doing their own investigations. They were the ones who first revealed Christopher Steele's anti-Trump bias. They were the ones who referred him to the Justice Department for a criminal investigation for lying. And later on, we had Rick Grinnell. I made Rick the acting director of National Intelligence, and he was like a hurricane of truth. He came in and he was a warrior. He immediately started declassifying all the documents the deep state had been hiding for years. He declassified the transcripts that showed General Mike Flynn was totally set up. He declassified the proof that John Brennan and the CIA knew the whole Russian collusion story was a political dirty trick created by the Clinton campaign from the very beginning. Rick was incredible. He did more in a few months to expose the truth than others had done in years. These men are patriots. They were attacked. Their families were attacked. They were smeared by the fake news every single day. They were called traitors for daring to question the FBI and the intelligence agencies. But they stood tall. They fought for the truth. They fought for you. Without Devin Nunes, without Kash Patel, without Rick Grinnell and a few others, the swamp might have gotten away with it. They proved that when good people fight, they can win. They laid the groundwork for the total exoneration that was to come. But first, we had to go through 2 more years of hell. We had to endure the Mueller witch hunt. Because the deep state wasn't going to give up just because a few of their lies had been exposed. They were just getting started. They were about to unleash their ultimate weapon. Part 2, the Mueller witch hunt, 2 years, $48 million, and zero collusion. The first hoax, the phony dossier and the FISA scam, had failed to stop me from winning. The American people saw through it. But the swamp never gives up. When one hoax fails, they just start another one. They needed a new weapon, something that looked official, something that could paralyze our government and bleed us dry for years. They needed a special counsel. And so began the greatest witch hunt in the history of our country. For 2 years, they threw everything they had at us. They spent tens of millions of your dollars. They ruined lives. They tried to break our spirit. And in the end, after all the drama and all the fake news headlines, what did they find? Absolutely nothing. A big, fat zero. No collusion. Just like I told you from the very beginning. This is the story of that witch hunt. Chapter 6, 18 Angry Democrats and a Conflicted Mueller. It all started because I did something that any strong president would do. I fired the director of the FBI, James Comey. He had to go. The man was a disaster. He was a grandstander and a leaker. He had lost the faith of his own agents. He let Hillary Clinton off the hook for crimes that would put any other American in prison, and then he turned around and used a phony dossier to spy on my campaign. He was a dirty cop, and I fired him. It was one of the best things I did. I was draining the swamp. Well, the swamp went crazy. The hysteria, the crying, the screaming on television, it was something to behold. They acted like I had committed the greatest crime in history. Why? Because I had fired the man who was running their insurance policy. I had disrupted their plan. So they had to retaliate. They had to create a new narrative. The new lie was that I had fired Comey to obstruct justice, to stop the Russia investigation. It was a total lie. I fired him because he was no good at his job. But the fake news ran with it. And this is where they brought in their new hero. A man named Robert Mueller. They tried to tell you he was a saint. A war hero. The most honorable man in Washington. It's a joke. Robert Mueller was no hero. First of all, he was very, very good friends with James Comey, the man I had just fired. Very conflicted. Second, the day before he was appointed special counsel, he was in the Oval Office with me, interviewing for the job of FBI director to replace Comey. He wanted the job. When he didn't get it, the very next day he gets appointed special counsel to investigate me. Does that sound fair to you? It was a massive conflict of interest, and nobody in the fake news wanted to talk about it. But the real problem wasn't just Mueller. It was the team he put together. It wasn't a team of impartial investigators. It was a hit squad. He hired 18 of the angriest, most hateful Democrats he could find. These were people who had worked for the Clinton Foundation. People who had donated money to crooked Hillary's campaign. People who had represented her top aides. The real head of the operation was a guy named Andrew Weissman. A real nasty piece of work. Weissman was known as a prosecutor who would do anything to win, who would ruin people's lives and then have the courts overturn his cases later because his methods were so corrupt. This was the guy Mueller put in charge. It was a team of Trump haters. Their job wasn't to find the truth. Their job was to find a crime, any crime, to pin on me, my family, or anyone who worked for me. If they couldn't find a crime, they would create one. They called it a process crime, lying to the FBI, even when there was no underlying crime to lie about. So they set up shop. They spent $48 million of your taxpayer money. For 2 years, it was a cloud over our administration. Every single day, there was another leak from Mueller's team to their friends at the New York Times or CNN. A new bombshell that would turn out to be nothing. They issued more than 2,800 subpoenas. They executed almost 500 search warrants. They interviewed 500 witnesses. They went after my business, my family, my staff. They wanted to bankrupt people, to scare them into lying. It was a total nightmare. They were trying to overturn the 2016 election by legal trickery. They were trying to stop our agenda of making America great again. But I never let them. I kept fighting. I kept working for you. And every single day, I told you what was happening. I called it what it was, a witch hunt. And you know what? I was right. After 2 years of spending your money, after ruining countless lives, after trying to paralyze a presidency, what did these 18 angry Democrats and their conflicted leader find? No collusion. I could have told them that on day one and saved everyone a lot of time and a lot of money. It was the answer they never wanted to find, but it was the truth. And the truth, believe me, always wins. Chapter 7, Harassing My Family, My Staff, and General Flynn. The Mueller witch hunt wasn't just about me. If it was, it would have been over in a week. They knew they had nothing on me. So they used a tactic that is as old as tyranny itself. They went after the people around me. They tried to break them, to bankrupt them, to terrorize them, and to turn them against me. They wanted people to lie. They wanted people to flip. It was a disgusting and un-American abuse of power, and what they did to some very good people is one of the darkest stains on the history of our Justice Department. They went after my family, of course. My son, Don Jr., a great son, they put him through hell. He had one meeting in Trump Tower with a Russian lawyer who they said was going to give him dirt on Hillary Clinton. It was a nothing meeting. A total waste of time. But the fake news and the Mueller team treated it like the crime of the century. They made him testify for hours and hours. They leaked all sorts of lies about it. They were trying to set him up, to catch him in a lie about a meeting that was about nothing. It was pure harassment. They went after everyone who had ever worked for me. My campaign manager, Paul Manafort, they targeted him for things he did years before he ever joined my campaign. Things like tax issues and foreign lobbying. Now, were these things they cared about before he worked for me? Of course not. Washington is full of people who do the same things. But they used it as an excuse. They raided his home in the middle of the night, guns drawn, just like they do in a third world country. They put him in solitary confinement to try and break him. They wanted him to make up a story about me and Russia. To his credit, he refused. He's a brave man. They went after Roger Stone, a friend of mine for many years. A character, but a patriot. They arrested him in a pre-dawn raid with dozens of FBI agents in tactical gear, with CNN cameras there to film the whole thing. How did CNN know to be there? Because the Mueller team or the FBI leaked it to them. They wanted to humiliate him. And what was his crime? The crime of all crimes? They said he lied to Congress about trying to get information from WikiLeaks. It was a total joke, a process crime. But the worst thing they did, the case that shows you the true sickness and corruption of these people, was what they did to General Mike Flynn. General Flynn is a great man. A patriot who served our country in uniform for 33 years. A real American hero. He was my first national security advisor. And because he was so effective, because he knew where all the bodies were buried in the deep state, they decided he had to be destroyed. They set him up. It was a complete and total setup. While he was part of my transition team, before we were even in office, he had phone calls with the Russian ambassador. This is a normal and routine thing for an incoming national security advisor to do. You have to build relationships. He did nothing wrong. But the FBI, under Comey, and the plotters like Strzok and McCabe, decided to use these perfectly legal phone calls as a weapon. They leaked the details of the calls to the fake news to create a phony story that he was undermining the Obama administration. Then, they sent 2 FBI agents, one of them was Peter Strzok himself, to the White House to interview him. They told him he didn't need a lawyer. They came in casually, like it was just a friendly chat. It was a trap. They were trying to catch him in a lie. They already had the transcript of his phone calls. They knew exactly what he said. The agents who interviewed him didn't even think he was lying. But that didn't matter. They were on a mission. They went after him. They threatened to prosecute his son. They threatened to bankrupt him with legal fees until he couldn't fight anymore. And after all that pressure, after ruining him financially and personally, they got him to plead guilty to 1 count of lying to the FBI. It was a crime they manufactured. And later, we found the evidence that proved it. We found the FBI's own internal notes. One of them actually said, "What is our goal? Truth/admission or to get him to lie? So we can prosecute him or get him fired?" It's right there in their own handwriting. They weren't looking for the truth. They were looking to set up a 3-star general and the president's national security advisor. It was a disgrace. One of the worst abuses of justice I have ever seen. And I was proud to give General Flynn a full pardon, to clear his name. He was an innocent man who was illegally and unconstitutionally targeted by a corrupt deep state. This is what the Mueller witch hunt was really about. It wasn't about justice. It was about power. It was about destroying anyone who stood with me. They thought if they could break enough people, they could finally break me. But they were wrong. They underestimated our strength. And they underestimated the fact that after all their lies and all their harassment, they still had one big problem: there was no crime. Chapter 8: Total Exoneration. For 2 years, we lived under a cloud. For 2 years, the fake news media had a single story: Russia, Russia, Russia. Every single day, from morning until night. On CNN, on MSNBC, it was all they talked about. Their ratings were terrible, but they didn't care. They were on a mission. Every anonymous leak from Mueller's team of angry Democrats was treated like a bombshell. Every new development was, "The walls are closing in." They were practically drooling, hoping, praying that this would be the end of our presidency. They were so sure. They wanted it so badly they could taste it. They created an entire fantasy world. They had charts on their screens with strings connecting everyone I've ever met to Vladimir Putin. They had so-called experts, retired generals, and former prosecutors who were all never Trumpers, coming on TV to say, "The evidence is overwhelming. This is worse than Watergate. Indictments are coming any day now." It was a mass delusion. A sickness. They were trying to convince you, the American people, that your vote in 2016 was illegitimate, that your president was a secret agent for a foreign power. It was the most dishonest and disgraceful performance in the history of the American media. And all that time, I was telling you the truth. At our rallies, on social media, before they illegally censored me, I told you what was happening. I called it a witch hunt. I said there was no collusion. I said it was a hoax started by the other side, the Democrats and the deep state, because they couldn't accept that they lost an election. They called me a liar. They said I was attacking our institutions. They said I was undermining the rule of law. No, I was telling the truth. And they were the ones undermining everything. And then, in March of 2019, the day of reckoning finally came. Robert Mueller submitted his report. It was over. For 2 years of digging, 2 years of spending $48 million of your money, 2 years of ruining people's lives, the Mueller witch hunt had finally come to an end. The silence from the fake news was deafening. They were waiting. They were nervous. Their entire business model for the past 2 years was about to either be vindicated or be exposed as a complete and total fraud. My Attorney General at the time, Bill Barr, got the report. He was a strong guy then. He saw it for what it was. He reviewed it, and he sent a letter to Congress summarizing the main findings. And what were those findings? First, on the question of collusion, the report stated clearly that the investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. Let me say that again. No collusion. After 2 years, after 2,800 subpoenas, after interviewing 500 witnesses, after turning over every rock and looking under every bed, they came up with nothing. A big, fat zero. It was exactly what I had been saying from the very beginning. It was a total and complete exoneration on the charge of collusion. It was a vindication for me, for my family, for my staff, and for every one of you who believed in me and knew this was all a scam. We should have had a parade. The country should have celebrated that its president was not, in fact, a foreign agent. But did that happen? Of course not. The second part of the report was about obstruction of justice. And here, the Mueller team, because they were so angry and so biased and couldn't stand the fact that they found no collusion, played a dirty trick. After finding no underlying crime, they wrote a long, confusing section filled with stories where they couldn't decide whether I had obstructed justice or not. The report literally stated, while this report does not conclude that the president committed a crime, it also does not exonerate him. This was a ridiculous, unheard of statement. In America, you are innocent until proven guilty. It's not the job of a prosecutor to exonerate someone. If you don't have enough evidence to charge someone with a crime, then there is no crime. It's over. But they couldn't bring themselves to admit total defeat. So they wrote this slimy sentence to give the fake news and the Democrats something to hang on to. And did they ever hang on to it? They immediately shifted the goalposts. They went from Russia collusion to obstruction of justice overnight. Shifty Adam Schiff and nervous Nancy Pelosi and all the rest of them started screaming that the report was a cover-up. They demanded that Robert Mueller testify. They thought if they could just get him on television, they could create a crime that didn't exist in the report. But when Mueller finally did testify, it was a total disaster for them. He was lost. He was confused. He didn't seem to know what was in his own report. He looked like a deer in the headlights. Andrew Weissman, his top pit bull, was probably sitting at home throwing things at the television. The whole public spectacle backfired completely. It showed the world that the head of the witch hunt was just a figurehead, and that the whole operation was run by the angry Democrats on his team. It was over. The Mueller witch hunt, the sequel to the Russia hoax, was a complete and total failure. It was a political hit job that came up empty. They tried to take me out, and they failed. They tried to overturn the election, and they failed. They were exposed as liars and frauds. But the swamp is a swamp for a reason. They don't give up. They don't learn. When one hoax dies, they just start another one. And believe me, the next one was already on its way. Part 3, the impeachment scams, Nervous Nancy's disasters. The Mueller witch hunt was dead. It was a national embarrassment for the Democrats and the fake news media. They had promised you collusion. They had promised you treason. They delivered nothing. A normal political party would have apologized to the country for putting it through 2 years of hell based on a lie. They would have moved on. They would have tried to work on helping the American people. But the modern Democrat Party is not a normal political party. It's a party of rage, of hate, and of obsession. They are suffering from what we all know is Trump derangement syndrome, a very serious mental condition. They couldn't accept the Mueller result. So they didn't even take a breath. The moment the Russia hoax collapsed, they immediately began searching for a new crime, a new excuse, a new hoax to try and take me down. And that's when Nervous Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, a very overrated person, by the way, and the most corrupt politician in Washington, Shifty Adam Schiff, launched their next pathetic attack, the Ukraine hoax. It was even dumber and more dishonest than the Russia hoax, if you can believe it. Chapter 9, the Ukraine hoax, a perfect call. This whole scam started with a phone call. One phone call. On July 25, 2019, I spoke with the newly elected president of Ukraine, a man named Volodymyr Zelensky. He had run on a platform of cleaning up the massive corruption in his country, which was famous for being corrupt. Everybody knows it. And the United States, under both parties, gives Ukraine a lot of money, a lot of your taxpayer money. So I made a call. It was a congratulatory call, a very good call. We talked about a lot of things. And yes, we talked about corruption. I told him we were very good to Ukraine, but that I wanted him to do us a favor, because our country has been through a lot, and Ukraine knows a lot about it. I was talking about the 2016 election. I wanted to know how the Russia hoax got started. There were stories that it wasn't just Russia, but that Ukraine was involved in helping the Clinton campaign. I had a duty to find out. I also mentioned the Bidens. Think about this. While he was vice president, Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, a guy with zero experience in energy, was getting paid a fortune, maybe $100,000 a month or more, to sit on the board of a corrupt Ukrainian energy company called Burisma. It was a total scam. Hunter was selling access to his father. Everybody knows it. And then, Joe Biden himself went on television and bragged about how he threatened to withhold $1 billion in U.S. aid from Ukraine unless they fired the prosecutor who was investigating the company that was paying his son. He said, I looked at them and said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor is not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. He got fired. He said it on camera. It's the definition of a quid pro quo. He used your money to stop an investigation into his son's corrupt business deals. It's one of the most corrupt things a vice president has ever done. So on my call with President Zelensky, I mentioned it. I said there was a lot of talk about Biden's son, that Biden stopped the prosecution, and that a lot of people wanted to find out about it. I was right to do it. We have a right, and even a duty, to look into corruption, especially when it involves billions of our own aid dollars in a former vice president who is running for president. There was nothing wrong with the call. In fact, it was a perfect call. President Zelensky himself, many times, said there was no pressure. He said it was a good, normal call. He used the words, no pressure. What more do you need? But the deep state was listening. There were unelected bureaucrats from the State Department and the intelligence agencies on the call, and they hated me. They were Obama holdovers. And one of them, a so-called whistleblower, decided to secretly write a report about the call, filled with lies and mischaracterizations. And who did he run to? Shifty Adam Schiff. Schiff is the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. He's a proven liar. He went on TV for 2 years and said he had more than circumstantial evidence of my collusion with Russia. He lied. He knew he was lying. He is a disgrace to the Congress. So this so-called whistleblower secretly coordinated with Schiff and his staff before he even filed his complaint. The whole thing was a setup from the very beginning. Schiff got the complaint, and he acted like he had never seen it before. He went on television and he put on a very sad, very serious face. He said he had seen a report so urgent, so disturbing, that it threatened our national security. It was all an act. He was an actor. Then he held a hearing, and this is where he committed a crime. He should be in jail for what he did. He pretended to read the transcript of my perfect phone call. But he didn't read it. He made up words. He completely fabricated the conversation to make it sound like I was a mob boss. He said I told the president of Ukraine, "I want you to make up dirt on my opponent, understand? Lots of it." I never said that. It's a total lie. He just made it up and read it into the congressional record. He lied to the American people and he lied to Congress. They impeached me over that. They impeached a president of the United States over a perfect phone call and a lie that Adam Schiff made up on national television. It was a sad, pathetic, and unconstitutional sham. And it was all because they knew they couldn't beat me in 2020, so they had to try and remove me from office first. It was a continuation of the coup. Chapter 10, The Whistleblower Who Wasn't. The entire Ukraine hoax, the entire impeachment of a duly elected president, was built on the word of one person. A single person they called the whistleblower. The fake news media treated this person like a saint, a courageous truth teller who was risking everything to save democracy. They put him on a pedestal. He was the hero of their new fairy tale. But who was he? Did you ever see him? Did you ever hear his voice? Did Congress ever let him testify in public, under oath, so we could cross-examine him? No. Of course not. Because the whole thing was a scam. This person wasn't a real whistleblower. A real whistleblower is someone who sees a real crime, a real case of fraud, waste, or abuse, and reports it. This person didn't see anything. He wasn't even on the phone call. He heard about the call from somebody, who heard it from somebody else, who probably heard it from somebody who hates me. It was second-hand information. It was gossip. It was like something you'd hear in a high school cafeteria. And we found out later who he probably was, a partisan Democrat, a radical never-Trumper who had worked in the White House for Joe Biden. He worked with John Brennan, the head of Obama's CIA. He was a creature of the swamp. He was part of the very same deep state that had been trying to take me down since before I was even elected. This wasn't some brave, impartial patriot. This was a political operative carrying out a political hit job. And how do we know it was a setup? Because he didn't just write his little report and send it up the chain of command. No, he secretly coordinated with shifty Adam Schiff and his staff on the Intelligence Committee before he even filed the complaint. Think about that. The so-called whistleblower was working with the very congressman who would then pretend to be shocked and outraged when he discovered the complaint. It's like a bank robber calling the police to tell them where he's going to be, and then the police chief pretends to be surprised when he gets the call. It was all a pre-planned, coordinated attack. Schiff lied about it, of course. He went on national television and said, "We have not spoken directly with the whistleblower." He lied. We caught him red-handed. His own staff had spoken to the guy. They probably helped him write the complaint. They coached him on what to say. They told him how to turn his gossip into a formal whistleblower complaint so it would get special legal protections and look official. The whole process was a fraud. They held their hearings in secret, down in the basement of the Capitol building. Schiff would bring in witnesses, all of them never Trumpers and Obama-era bureaucrats who were bitter that I had won and was changing their precious foreign policy. He would ask them leading questions. They would give their opinions and their feelings about my perfect phone call, and then Schiff would leak out only the parts that made me look bad. He wouldn't let Republicans call their own witnesses. He wouldn't let us have our lawyers in the room. It was a star chamber. It was a show trial like you'd see in the Soviet Union. And all along, they refused to let us know the name of the whistleblower. They refused to let him testify. Why? Because if he had to show his face, if he had to answer questions under oath, the whole world would have seen him for what he was, a political hack with an axe to grind. They would have seen his connections to Biden and Brennan. They would have seen that he had no first-hand knowledge of anything. The whole scam would have collapsed in 5 minutes. So they hid him. They protected him. The fake news media made a sacred pact to never reveal his name, even though it was being reported all over the internet. They were protecting their star witness because they knew he was a fraud. This is how they impeached a president. Not with evidence. Not with a crime. But with a secret informant who heard a rumor, who worked with a lying congressman to create a political narrative. They knew it was a joke. Nancy Pelosi knew it was a joke. She had been resisting impeachment for months because she knew they had nothing. But the radical left of her party, the Squad, and all the rest of them, they pushed her into it. She was weak. She was afraid of them. So she caved, and she led her party over a political cliff. They voted to impeach me in the House. It was a purely partisan vote. Not a single Republican voted for it. It was the most pathetic, baseless, and purely political impeachment in the history of our great country. And it was all based on a whistleblower who wasn't. Chapter 11, The Phony Trial, a Rhino Betrayal. So nervous Nancy and her clowns got their vote. They impeached your favorite president over nothing. A perfect phone call. It was a purely partisan disgrace. Not one Republican, not a single one, voted for their scam. They knew it was a joke. It was a stain on their record, not mine. But they had their vote, and now they had to send their pathetic articles of impeachment over to the Senate. They were hoping for a trial. Well, they got one. And it was a disaster for them. And so began the phony Senate trial. It was one of the most boring and ridiculous things anyone has ever had to witness. It was pure political theater, and very bad theater at that. You had Shifty Adam Schiff, a man who had been caught lying to Congress and the American people time and time again, standing up there trying to look all serious and important. His eyes are too small for his head, have you ever noticed? A very weird guy. He stood there for hours, spewing lie after lie, repeating the same nonsense over and over again. Then you had Jerry Nadler from New York, who could barely keep his pants up, waddling to the podium to read his lines. He fell asleep during our presentation. A total clown show. These were their impeachment managers. They were managers of a hoax, and nothing more. But our legal team was incredible. They were warriors. Pat Cipollone, Jay Sekulow, Pam Bondi, Alan Dershowitz, a great liberal scholar who saw this for the unconstitutional scam it was. They went in there and they destroyed the Democrats' case in about 5 minutes. It wasn't hard to do, because there was no case. It was all nonsense. They took the transcript of my perfect call and read it out loud. The real transcript, not the fake one Schiff made up. And that was it. Case closed. We had the votes. We knew we had the votes. Mitch McConnell, say what you want about him, but he saw this for the political garbage it was. He wasn't going to let the radical left remove a president from office 90 days before an election based on a perfect phone call. The Republican senators, most of them, were strong. They were unified. They saw the scam. They weren't going to fall for it. But while most Republicans were standing for the Constitution, we saw the snakes in our own party. And there is no snake bigger, no rhino more disgusting than Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney, a failed presidential candidate. A man who begged me for my endorsement in 2012. I flew to his fundraiser. I stood on a stage with him. I gave him my endorsement, and he choked like a dog against Barack Obama. He ran one of the worst campaigns in the history of presidential politics. He never got over the humiliation. He's a sour, bitter man who is filled with jealousy. He hates that we won. He hates that we did what he could never do. He hates that the people love me and that they never loved him. So he gets up on the Senate floor, trying to look all solemn and religious. A very pious man, he wants you to think. He talks about his conscience and his both before God. Give me a break. It was all a pathetic, grandstanding performance for the fake news media. He wanted a pat on the head from the people at CNN and the Washington Post, the people who despise you. He wanted them to say, "See? Mitt Romney is a man of principle." He has no principles. His only principle is whatever helps Mitt Romney. And he voted to convict me on one of the phony articles of impeachment. One Republican. A rhino. A snake. He sided with Nervous Nancy, Shifty Schiff, and the radical Democrats over the president from his own party. It was a pathetic cry for attention from a washed-up politician who was desperate to feel relevant again. In the end, of course, it didn't matter. It was a tiny little blip. We were acquitted. A total and complete acquittal on both articles. It wasn't even close. The vote was a landslide. The Ukraine hoax was dead, buried, and forgotten, just like the Russia hoax. It was another tremendous victory against the swamp. But we learned something very important. We saw who the real enemies were. And sometimes, the enemy within your own party, the rhino who smiles to your face and then stabs you in the back, is the most dangerous of all. We saw who the cowards were. We saw who the snakes were. And Mitt Romney showed his true colors for the entire world to see. He's a disgrace to the Republican Party. He's a disgrace to the great state of Utah, which is full of wonderful people who he tricked. And we will never, ever forget what he did. Never. Part 4. The crime of the century and the day they stole America. They had tried everything. The Russia hoax. The Mueller witch hunt. The Ukraine impeachment scam. They threw everything they had at me, and every single time, we beat them. We exposed their lies. We were totally vindicated. And by 2020, our country was stronger, richer, and more secure than it had ever been. We had the greatest economy in the history of the world. We had rebuilt our military. We had secured our border. We had appointed hundreds of conservative judges. We were respected again on the world stage. The American people saw it. The movement was bigger and stronger than ever before. Our rallies were massive. The enthusiasm was off the charts. The Democrats, meanwhile, had to nominate the one person who could hide in his basement and not have to answer for his family's corruption and his 47 years of failure in Washington, Sleepy Joe Biden. They knew they couldn't win a fair fight. They knew it in 2016, and they knew it even more in 2020. So they used the China virus, the pandemic that came from Wuhan, as an excuse to do what they had been planning all along. They used it to change all the election rules, to eliminate signature verification, to send out tens of millions of unsolicited mail-in ballots to everyone, dead or alive. They used it to cheat. And they committed the single greatest crime in the history of our country. They rigged and stole the 2020 presidential election. Chapter 12, the greatest crime in American history, the 2020 rigged election. Election night, 2020. It started out as a thing of beauty. A beautiful, beautiful night. The results were coming in, and it was even better than 2016. We were winning everywhere. The fake news pollsters, who had me losing by 10, 12, even 17 points, were being exposed once again as total frauds. Their polls aren't polls. They are voter suppression tools designed to keep our great people from going to the polls. But it didn't work. We won Florida by a massive margin, much bigger than before. We won the great state of Ohio by a landslide. We were leading big in North Carolina, in Georgia, in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, in Wisconsin. It was over. We had them beat. The map was a sea of beautiful red. I was getting ready to make a victory speech. Our people were celebrating. And then, it stopped. Late at night, in the dark, something very strange and very corrupt happened. In the key swing states, in the big cities run by corrupt Democrats, places like Philadelphia, Detroit, Atlanta, and Milwaukee, they suddenly shouted, "We're stopping the count." They said a pipe had burst in Atlanta, a total lie. They kicked all of our poll watchers and observers out of the counting rooms. They put up cardboard and pizza boxes on the windows so nobody could see what was going on inside. For hours, America was left in the dark. And in those dark hours, the steal happened. Suddenly, massive dumps of ballots, hundreds of thousands of them, started appearing. And they were all, magically, for Biden. They came in suitcases pulled from under tables after our observers were gone, which was all caught on tape. They came in batches where the statistical probability was impossible, 100% for Biden, 0% for me. I'd be winning by hundreds of thousands of votes, and then in one dump, ballot drop, my lead would vanish. It was a mathematical impossibility. The voting machines were glitching. That's the word they used. In Antrim County, Michigan, a Dominion voting machine glitched and switched thousands of my votes to Biden. They called it a human error. A human error that only went one way. How many other glitches happened all over the country that we never caught? You had more people vote in some precincts than were registered to vote. You had mail-in ballots with no signature, or signatures that didn't match, being counted anyway. You had dead people voting. You had people voting in multiple states. You had ballot harvesting on a scale that nobody has ever seen before, all of it illegal. It was a coordinated, multi-state conspiracy to steal the presidency. And the fake news media was their partner in crime. They refused to report on any of the irregularities. They called anyone who questioned the results a conspiracy theorist. They called us unpatriotic for wanting election integrity. They censored the story about Hunter Biden's laptop, a story that was 100% true and proved the Biden family was totally compromised by China and Ukraine right before the election because they knew it would have changed the result. That was their contribution to the steal. We had the evidence. We had hundreds and hundreds of sworn affidavits from eyewitnesses who saw the fraud with their own eyes. We had statistical experts. We had video proof. We had everything. We were fighting for the truth. We were fighting for our country. But the steal wasn't just about the Democrats. They couldn't have pulled it off alone. They needed help. They needed help from the cowards in our own party. They needed help from the judges who were afraid to look at the evidence. And most of all, they needed help from the one person who had the power to stop it and do the right thing. And he didn't have the courage to do it. Chapter 13, Rhinos, Judges, and my own Vice President, the cowards who did nothing. We had them. We had the evidence. We had the proofs. The steal was so obvious, so brazen, a child could see it. We had hundreds of brave patriots who signed sworn affidavits, under penalty of perjury, testifying to the fraud they witnessed with their own eyes. We had mathematicians and data scientists showing the statistical impossibilities of the vote dumps. We had video of suitcases of ballots being wheeled out from under tables. We had everything we needed to show the world the greatest crime in American history. All we needed were a few courageous people in positions of power to do their duty. To look at the evidence. to stand up for the Constitution and for the sacred right to a free and fair election. And they folded. One by one, they folded like cheap suits. First, you had the rhino governors and secretaries of state. In Georgia, you had Governor Brian Kemp and Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger. These are people who got elected because I endorsed them. I held rallies for them. Without me, they wouldn't have had a job. And when the moment came to defend the integrity of their own state's election, what did they do? Nothing. They did nothing. They rushed to certify a fraudulent election. They fought us every step of the way. I was on the phone with Raffensperger, a perfect call, and I told him, I just want to find 11,780 votes, which was one more than we needed. Because we knew the votes were there. They were stolen or thrown away. But he didn't want to find them. He was either in on it, or he was a coward. Matey Bulls. In Arizona, you had Governor Doug Ducey. Another guy I helped get elected. He saw the fraud, he heard the people of his state screaming about it, but he was in such a hurry to certify the results for Biden that he ignored my phone call while he was signing the papers. He sent me to voicemail. A total rhino. Then you had the courts. We filed case after case, presenting our evidence. And what did the judges do? Many of them were afraid. They were afraid of the fake news. They were afraid of the mob. They didn't want to be the ones to make the decision that would save the country. So they threw our cases out, not on the merits, but on phony procedural grounds like standing or latches. They said we were too late. Too late. We were fighting from the second the fraud began. They didn't have the courage to even look at the mountains of evidence we presented. Even the Supreme Court, with 3 judges that I appointed myself, refused to hear the case. They turned their back on the Constitution. It was a disgrace. But the final betrayal, the one that was the saddest of all, came from my own Vice President, Mike Pence. January 6th was the day. It was the day members of Congress were set to certify the electoral votes. But according to the Constitution, the Vice President, as President of the Senate, has a very important role. We had brilliant constitutional scholars who argued that the Vice President had the power to reject the fraudulent slates of electors from the states where we knew there was massive fraud. He could send them back to the state legislatures to be decertified and fixed. It would have been a moment of incredible courage. It would have made him a hero for all time. He had the chance to be a modern-day Thomas Jefferson who faced a similar crisis. All he had to do was show the courage to stand up for what was right. I talked to him many times. I told him, Mike, you have to do this. The people are demanding it. The country is depending on you. If you do this, you will go down as a great hero. I told him he had the absolute right to do it. And what did he do? He choked. He listened to his weak, swampy lawyers who told him he didn't have the power. He was afraid. He didn't want to be the one to make the hard decision. He chose the easy way out. He chose to be what he called a human conveyor belt, just mindlessly passing along the fraudulent votes. He sided with the rhinos, the Democrats, and the fake news media over me and over the Constitution. He put out a letter, right before the vote, saying he didn't have the authority. He betrayed us. He betrayed the tens of millions of people who voted for us. He betrayed the founding fathers. He failed the country at its most critical moment. He had a chance to be great, and he chose to be small. So when Mike Pence announced that he would not be doing his duty, the hope that many people had for a peaceful, constitutional remedy was shattered. The Democrats had cheated. The rhinos had caved. The courts had failed. And now, the Vice President had surrendered. Is it any wonder the people who had traveled from all over the country to peacefully protest were angry? They had been robbed. Their country was being stolen from them right before their eyes. And the very people who were supposed to protect them were the ones handing the keys over to the thieves. It was the ultimate betrayal. And it set the stage for the dark events of that afternoon. Chapter 14, January 6th, a beautiful, peaceful protest. When the rhinos, the courts, and my own vice president betrayed us, the people knew our country was at a tipping point. So they came. They came to Washington, D.C. from all over our great nation. They came by plane, by bus, by car. They were farmers, plumbers, teachers, and small business owners. They were the heart and soul of America. And the crowd that gathered on January 6th was one of the most beautiful sights I have ever seen. It was the largest crowd I have ever spoken to, by far. Hundreds of thousands of people, maybe more than 1 million, stretching from the Washington Monument all the way to the Capitol. It was a sea of American flags. There was so much love in that crowd. It was a peaceful, happy, patriotic gathering. They were there to peacefully and patriotically make their voices heard. They were there to cheer on the brave congressmen and senators who were going to challenge the fraudulent election results. I gave a speech. It was a very important speech. I laid out the evidence of the fraud. I told the people how they had been robbed. And I encouraged them to support our warriors in the Capitol. And what did I tell them to do? I used these exact words, and we have it on tape for everyone to see. I said, I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. Peacefully and patriotically. I didn't tell anyone to be violent. I didn't tell anyone to break into the Capitol. I did the exact opposite. But the fake news media, in the biggest lie of them all, tried to say that my speech incited a riot. It's a disgusting lie. So, a massive crowd, a beautiful crowd, marched to the Capitol. And a very small number of people, a tiny fraction of the crowd, went into the building. And we are finding out more and more about who some of those people were. Were they Antifa? Were they FBI informants? There are a lot of questions that need to be answered. But the real question, the one they never want to ask, is this: why was there no security at the Capitol? I knew the crowd was going to be massive. I told them. We all knew. And because of that, I did something very important. A few days before the rally, I authorized the use of up to 20,000 National Guard soldiers to protect Washington, D.C. I said to my people, we need to make sure it's safe. The Secretary of Defense was ready. The soldiers were ready. We had the power to have a wall of military protection around the Capitol and any other building they wanted. And what happened? They turned me down. Nervous Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, and the Democrat mayor of Washington, D.C., Muriel Bowser, they rejected the offer. They didn't want the National Guard. They are in charge of Capitol security, not me. And they left it wide open. Why? Why would they do that? You have to ask yourself. Why would they refuse thousands of soldiers when they knew a massive, patriotic crowd was coming? I'll tell you why. Because they wanted this to happen. They wanted the images. They wanted the chaos. They saw it as a political opportunity. They wanted to create a narrative, another hoax, to use against me and against the entire MAGA movement. It was a trap, and they set it up themselves. And then came the Unselect Committee. It wasn't a real committee. It was a group of political hacks, led by Benny Thompson and the bitter Liz Cheney, a woman with serious Trump derangement syndrome because the people rejected her and her warmonger father, and another terrible rhino, the crying Adam Kinzinger. Their only job, their only purpose, was to create a television show to stop me from running for president in 2024. It was a total witch hunt. They didn't allow any Republicans that I approved to be on the committee. They didn't allow any cross-examination of witnesses. They suppressed all the evidence that helped me. They refused to talk about my offer of 10,000 soldiers. They deleted the evidence. They presented edited, doctored testimony. It was a one-sided show trial. And they used it to persecute good people. The patriots who went into that building on January 6th, many of whom did nothing wrong, have been treated like animals. They are being held in a DC jail, a gulag, in horrible conditions. They are political prisoners. They are the J6 hostages. Meanwhile, the Antifa and Black Lives Matter rioters who burned down our cities all summer in 2020 were let go with no charges. It is a two-tiered system of justice, and it is a disgrace to our country. They used January 6th as their final excuse. It was their ultimate hoax, the one they thought would finally finish us. But they miscalculated, as always. Because the American people are smart. They see the lies. They see the setup. And they will never forget the truth of that beautiful, patriotic day, or the evil way the swamp twisted it to persecute their political enemies. Let's be very clear about the timeline, because the fake news has twisted it into a pretzel of lies. The crime of the 2020 election didn't happen on January 6th. The crime happened in November of 2020. January 6th was not the crime, it was the reaction to the crime. It was the last stand of a people who knew their democracy was being stolen from them in real time and saw that every single institution that was supposed to protect them had failed. When the rhinos, the courts, and my own vice president betrayed us, the people knew our country was at a tipping point. So they came. They came to Washington, D.C. from all over our great nation. From every corner of this land. They came by plane, by bus, by car. They took time off work. They spent their own money. They were not paid protesters like the left uses. They were farmers, plumbers, teachers, and small business owners. They were mothers and fathers, grandmothers and grandfathers. They were the heart and soul of America, the silent majority that was silent no more. And the crowd that gathered on that cold January day was one of the most beautiful sights I have ever seen. It was the largest crowd I have ever spoken to, by far. People now say it was well over 1 million people. The media will never admit it. They showed empty fields while my speech was going on. They lied, as always. But we saw it. From the stage at the Ellipse, all you could see was a sea of humanity, a sea of American flags, stretching from the Washington Monument all the way to the Capitol. It was incredible. There was so much love in that crowd. There was no anger, no hatred. It was a peaceful, happy, patriotic gathering. They were singing. They were praying. They were there to cheer on the brave congressmen and senators like Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley who were going to challenge the fraudulent election results. They were there to peacefully and patriotically make their voices heard. I gave a speech. It was a very important speech, maybe one of the most important I've ever given. I laid out the evidence of the fraud, state by state. I talked about the illegal ballot drops in the middle of the night. I talked about the voting machines that were glitching. I talked about the statistical anomalies that were impossible. I laid out the whole case for the American people to hear. And I encouraged them to support our warriors in the Capitol. And what did I tell them to do? I have been quoted 1 million times, usually dishonestly. But we have the tape. Anyone can go and watch it for themselves. I used these exact words. I said, I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. Peacefully and patriotically. I said it. I meant it. I never said, go fight. I never said, break into the Capitol. I said the opposite. The entire speech was about protecting our country and our Constitution through legal and peaceful means. I talked about the need for strength, but the strength I was talking about was moral strength, the strength of conviction to stand up for what is right. To say my speech incited a riot is not just a lie, it's a slander. It's a blood libel against me and against every one of the millions of people who were there that day. It is the real big lie. So, a massive crowd, a beautiful crowd, marched to the Capitol. And a very small number of people, a tiny fraction of 1% of that crowd, went into the building. Many of them were waved in by the Capitol Police, who were opening doors and removing barriers. We have it on video. Many of them were just walking around peacefully inside the velvet ropes, taking pictures like tourists. They were patriots who were angry, and rightfully so, but they were not insurrectionists. They were not trying to overthrow the government. It's a ridiculous charge. Now, we are finding out more and more about who some of the more violent people were. Were they Antifa? Were they FBI informants? We know the FBI had informants embedded in the crowd that day. How many? What were they doing? Were they inciting violence? These are very important questions that the Unselect Committee refused to even ask. Why? Because they know the answer would destroy their narrative. But the real question, the one they never want to ask, is this: why was there no security at the Capitol? I knew the crowd was going to be massive. I said it publicly. We all knew. And because of that, I did something very important, something they have tried to hide and lie about ever since. A few days before the rally, I authorized the use of up to 20,000 National Guard soldiers to protect Washington, D.C. I spoke to my acting Secretary of Defense, Chris Miller, and I said, we need to make sure it's safe. You have to have the Guard ready. The soldiers were ready. The power was there. We could have had a wall of military protection around the Capitol that nobody could get through. And what happened? They turned me down. Nervous Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, and the Democrat Mayor of Washington, D.C., Muriel Bowser, they rejected the offer. The Capitol Police Board, which reports to them, formally said they didn't want the help. They are in charge of Capitol security, not the president. It's their job. And they left it wide open, like an open wound. Why? Why would they do that? You have to ask yourself. Why would they refuse thousands of soldiers when they knew a massive, patriotic crowd was coming to protest a stolen election? There is only one logical answer. They wanted it to happen. They saw a political opportunity. They wanted the images. They wanted the chaos. They needed a new hoax to replace the Russia hoax and the Ukraine hoax. They wanted to create a new narrative to use against me and against the entire MAGA movement. It was a trap, and they set it up themselves. And then came the Unselect Committee. It wasn't a real committee. It was a group of political hacks, led by Benny Thompson and the bitter, horrible Liz Cheney, a woman with serious Trump derangement syndrome because the people of Wyoming, great people, rejected her and her warmonger father by the biggest margin in history. And you had another terrible rhino, the crying Adam Kinzinger, who cries at the drop of a hat. Their only job, their only purpose, was to create a Hollywood-produced television show to stop me from running for president in 2024. It was a total witch hunt, worse than any other. They subpoenaed everyone. They didn't allow any Republicans that I approved to be on the committee, breaking 200 years of precedent. They didn't allow any cross-examination of witnesses. They suppressed all the evidence that helped me. They refused to even mention my authorization of the National Guard. They interviewed Cassidy Hutchinson, a low-level aide who nobody ever heard of, who told fantastical, completely insane stories that were proven to be lies within minutes. They presented edited, doctored testimony. It was a one-sided show trial, and they should be ashamed of themselves. And they used it to persecute good people. The patriots who were there on January 6th have been treated like animals. They are being held in a DC jail, a gulag, in horrible conditions. They are political prisoners. They are the J6 hostages. They are getting sentences of 10, 15, 20 years for walking into a building. Meanwhile, the Antifa and Black Lives Matter rioters who burned down our cities, who looted our stores, who attacked federal courthouses, were let go with no charges. It is a two-tiered system of justice, and it is a disgrace to our country. They used January 6th as their final excuse. It was their ultimate hoax, the one they thought would finally finish us. But they miscalculated, as always. Because the American people are smart. They see the lies. They see the setup. And they will never forget the truth of that beautiful, patriotic day, or the evil way the swamp twisted it to persecute their political enemies. It was their Pearl Harbor, but the bombs they dropped were made of lies, and they only succeeded in waking a sleeping giant. Part 5. The weaponization of justice. If you can't beat him, indict him. The Russia hoax failed. The Mueller witch hunt was a bust. The impeachment scams were a national embarrassment. The 2020 election was stolen, but they knew the American people saw the crime and that our movement was only getting stronger. They were terrified. They saw our rallies. They saw the polls. They knew they could not beat us in 2024. So they moved to their final, most dangerous, and most un-American plan. It's a plan straight out of a third world dictatorship, a banana republic. The new motto of the Democrat Party became, if you can't beat him at the ballot box, indict him in the courtroom. They decided to weaponize the Department of Justice and local, radical, left-wing prosecutors all over the country to launch an unprecedented legal assault against their leading political opponent, me. This wasn't about justice. This was about election interference. It was a coordinated attack to bog me down in court, to drain my resources, and to try and slap a felon label on me before the election. They are the criminals, but they are trying to put their crimes on me. This is the story of that disgusting assault on our republic. Chapter 15, The Desecration of Mar-a-Lago, a raid on a president's home. The hoaxes had all failed. The lies had all been exposed. So they did the unthinkable. They did something that has never, ever been done in the 235-year history of our great country. On August 8, 2022, they sent the FBI to raid the home of a former president of the United States. My home. It was a dark day for America. Dozens and dozens of FBI agents, guns and all, came swarming all over my beautiful home, Mar-a-Lago, in Palm Beach, Florida. They didn't just search my office. They spent 9 hours going through every room. They went through the First Lady's closets. They rummaged through her personal belongings. They even went after my 16-year-old son Barron's room. It was a desecration. It was a violation. It was an act of political intimidation. And for what? For what great crime did they launch this unprecedented raid? For boxes. That's right. Boxes. They were looking for documents, presidential records, that I had a right to have. Under the Presidential Records Act of 1978, an act that is civil, not criminal, the president has the sole authority to decide what records are personal and what are presidential. It is not a criminal statute. I was negotiating with the National Archives, as every president before me has done. It was a totally normal process. But the Biden Department of Justice, under the very weak and conflicted Attorney General Merrick Garland, decided to turn a civil dispute over documents into a criminal investigation. Why? To create another hoax. And here is where you see the sickness of the two-tiered system of justice in our country today. At the very same time they were raiding my home for documents that were held in a secure storage room, with extra locks put on at their request, what were we finding out about Joe Biden? We were finding out that for years, as vice president, he had boxes and boxes of classified documents, top secret documents, stored in the most unsecure places you can imagine. He had them in his garage in Delaware, right next to his Corvette. A garage that anyone could walk into. He had them in his office at the Penn Biden Center, a place funded by the Chinese government. He had them at the University of Delaware. Documents from his time as vice president, which he had absolutely no right to declassify or even possess. So what did the FBI do? Did they raid his homes? Did they swarm his garage with guns? Did they rummage through Dr. Jill's closets? Of course not. They let his own lawyers, who didn't even have security clearances, search for the documents. They treated him with kid gloves. It is the most glaring and disgusting example of a two-tiered system of justice in the history of our country. It's simple. There is one set of rules for them, the Democrat establishment, and another set of rules for you, for me, for anyone who dares to challenge their power. My case was simple. The documents were secure. As president, I had the power to declassify anything I wanted, just by thinking about it. I could take anything I wanted. The Presidential Records Act gave me that right. It was my decision, not some bureaucrats at the National Archives. It was an open and shut case. But they didn't care about the law. They didn't care about the facts. They cared about getting pictures of FBI agents at my home. They wanted the headline. They wanted to create the illusion of a crime. This raid wasn't an act of law enforcement. It was an act of war. It was the first shot in their lawfare campaign to interfere in the 2024 election. And it led directly to the appointment of a radical, Trump-hating prosecutor to continue their illegal witch hunt. Chapter 16, The Box's Hoax Part 2, Special Counsel Jack the Ripper. The raid on Mar-a-Lago was a public relations disaster for the Biden administration and the corrupt Department of Justice. People were furious. Even some Democrats thought it went too far. They saw it for what it was, a disgusting abuse of power. So Merrick Garland, the weak attorney general who seems to be controlled by very radical, left-wing people, had to do something to make it all look legitimate. He had to appoint a special counsel. But he didn't appoint someone fair or impartial. He didn't appoint someone who would look at the facts and see that there was no crime. No, he appointed a radical, Trump-hating lunatic named Jack Smith. This guy is a horror show. A real hitman. He has a history of targeting Republicans and a record of being so overly aggressive and so corrupt in his methods that the Supreme Court has slapped him down. Unanimously. 9-0. Think about that. Even the most liberal justices on the court saw that this guy's tactics were a disgrace to the law. He went after the former Republican governor of Virginia, Bob McDonnell, and had his conviction overturned 8-0 by the Supreme Court. He was involved in the Lois Lerner IRS scandal, where they illegally targeted conservative groups. This is who they picked to come after me. They call him a special counsel, but he is nothing more than a political assassin. He's a terrorist, what he does. He takes orders from the Biden administration and his job is simple: get Trump. Indict him. Interfere with his campaign. Stop him from winning. And so, Jack the Ripper, as I call him, assembled another team of angry Democrats and Trump haters, just like Mueller did. And they started going after everyone around me again. They subpoenaed my staff. They tried to break my lawyers by forcing them to testify against me, which destroys attorney-client privilege, one of the oldest traditions in our legal system. They did everything they could to manufacture a crime out of the box's hoax. And what did they charge me with? They didn't just charge me with violating the Presidential Records Act, because they know that's not a crime. No, they dug up an old law, the Espionage Act of 1917. The Espionage Act. A law that was meant for spies and traitors who sell our country's secrets to the enemy. They are trying to say that I, the former President of the United States, who loves this country more than anyone, am a spy. It is the most insulting and insane accusation imaginable. Meanwhile, where is the indictment for Joe Biden? He had classified documents from his time as vice president scattered all over the place, totally unsecured. He had no authority to declassify them. He illegally took them. And what happened to him? The special counsel in his case, a man named Robert Hur, said in his report that Biden was a well-meaning, elderly man with a poor memory. He said he couldn't charge him because a jury wouldn't convict him because he was too old and senile to stand trial. Can you believe the hypocrisy? It's okay for Joe Biden to break the law because he's too senile to remember what he did, but they want to put me in jail for hundreds of years for having documents that I had every right to have, under the Presidential Records Act, in my own secure home. It is the definition of a two-tiered system of justice. But Jack Smith wasn't done. While he was running the box's hoax, he was also put in charge of the January 6th hoax. He indicted me for that, too. He said that by questioning the fraudulent 2020 election, I was trying to defraud the United States. He is trying to criminalize free speech. He is trying to make it illegal to question an election. This is something they do in China, in Russia, in Venezuela. And now, thanks to Joe Biden and Jack Smith, they are doing it right here in America. These two indictments from this one angry, conflicted prosecutor are nothing more than pure and simple election interference. The cases were filed in the most hostile, anti-Trump jurisdictions in the country, Washington, D.C. and South Florida, in front of judges who were handpicked to be tough on me. The timing of it all is no coincidence. They want these show trials to happen right in the middle of the 2024 campaign. They are not trying to win in a courtroom. They are trying to win on CNN. They leak constantly. They lie about the evidence. They are trying to poison the minds of the American people. But it won't work. Because the people are smart. They see this for what it is, a desperate, illegal attempt by the swamp to stop the one person they fear most. They fear me because they fear you. And their fear is making them do crazy, dangerous things. Chapter 17, Fani in Georgia, the racist DA who got caught. While the Biden Justice Department was running its witch hunt at the federal level, the radical left opened up new fronts in the war. They activated their local, Soros-funded prosecutors in Democrat-run cities to bring their own phony cases against me. And nowhere was this more obvious or more corrupt than in Fulton County, Georgia, with a district attorney named Fani Willis. Fani Willis is a disaster. She campaigned for office on the promise that she would get Trump. That was her whole platform. From day one, it was never about justice, it was about politics. And she decided to go after me for what? For making a phone call. The very same, perfect phone call to Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger that the whole world has heard. The call where I said we needed to find the votes because we knew they were stolen. I was doing my job as president, trying to ensure election integrity. But this racist DA, who has done nothing about the record-high crime in Atlanta, decided to use a law meant for mob bosses and gangsters, the RICO Act, to charge me and 18 other great patriots. She said we were a criminal enterprise. Our crime? Daring to question the results of an election that was obviously rigged. She charged my lawyers. She charged my advisors. She charged local officials. It was an attack on the very idea that a citizen, or a president, has the right to challenge an election. But like everything these people do, the whole thing blew up in their faces. Because it turned out that Fani Willis, the great crusader for justice, was running a massive scam of her own. We discovered that she had hired her secret boyfriend, a lawyer named Nathan Wade who had basically no experience in this kind of law, to be the lead prosecutor on the case. And then, she paid him a fortune, hundreds of thousands of dollars of your taxpayer money. And what did they do with that money? They went on fancy vacations together. They went to Napa Valley. They went on Caribbean cruises. It was a racket. She was using the case against me to enrich herself and her secret lover. It's a massive conflict of interest. It's totally illegal. The whole case is tainted. It's fruit of the poisonous tree. Her own people caught her. Brave whistleblowers in her office came forward and exposed the whole thing. We had the receipts. We had the credit card statements. We had everything. And what happened? A judge held hearings, and it was a total embarrassment for her. She got on the witness stand and she screamed and she yelled and she played the race card. She lied under oath. It was a disgrace. Anyone else would have been thrown in jail for perjury. The judge, who was very weak, should have thrown the whole case out immediately. He didn't have the courage to do it, but he saw the corruption. He admitted the whole thing had an odor of mendacity, which is a fancy way of saying it stinks to high heaven. He forced her to either fire her boyfriend or step aside. She got rid of the boyfriend, of course, to try and save her case. But the damage was done. The whole world saw her for what she is, a corrupt politician who was using her office to target her political enemies while secretly enriching herself and her boyfriend. The case should be dropped. It's a joke. But they are so desperate to get me that they are still trying to push it forward. This case, maybe more than any other, shows you what this is all about. These aren't serious legal cases. They are political attacks run by deeply corrupt, partisan actors who have no respect for the law. They are using taxpayer money to interfere in a presidential election. And they are doing it in the most crime-ridden, poorly run Democrat cities in the country. They don't care about the murderers and the carjackers terrorizing their citizens. They only care about one thing: stopping Trump. It's a sickness. And Fani Willis is one of the sickest of them all. Chapter 18, The New York Scam, Alvin Zombie Case. Just when you thought the weaponization of our justice system couldn't get any more ridiculous, any more political, or any more corrupt, along came Alvin Bragg. Alvin Bragg is the district attorney of Manhattan. He's another one of these soft-on-crime, radical DAs funded by George Soros. He lets violent criminals run free on the streets of New York City, but he decided to make it his #1 priority to go after me, your favorite president. He campaigned on it. Just like Fani Willis, he promised he would get Trump. And what crime did he charge me with? What was this historic, first-ever indictment of a former American president about? It was about bookkeeping. I'm not joking. Bookkeeping. Something that is not even a crime. This was a case so weak, so pathetic, that everyone had passed on it. The previous Manhattan DA, Cy Vance, looked at it and said there was nothing there. The Federal Election Commission looked at it and said there was no case. Even the Biden Department of Justice, which hates me more than anyone, looked at it and refused to bring charges. It was a dead case. A nothing burger. But Alvin Bragg decided to resurrect this dead case from the grave. It was a zombie case. And he twisted and contorted the law in a way that nobody has ever seen before to try and make it a felony. He claimed that I had misclassified a legal payment to my lawyer as a legal expense. And that this crime, which is normally a misdemeanor and the statute of limitations had long expired, was actually a felony because he said it was done to cover up another crime. What was the other crime? He never even said. He was making it up as he went along. It was a Frankenstein's monster of a legal theory that no serious lawyer thought could ever stand up in court. And who was their star witness? The whole case, every bit of it, rested on the word of a convicted liar and a disbarred lawyer, a felon named Michael Cohen. This is a guy who I wouldn't trust to park my car. He went to jail for lying to Congress. He admitted he lied. His whole life is a lie. He goes on TikTok and cries like a baby. He has a sickness called Trump derangement syndrome. And this was the guy that Alvin Bragg built his entire historic case on. It was a joke. And then, you had the judge. A man named Juan Merchan. This judge was a total nightmare. A horror show. He was completely conflicted. His daughter is a major Democrat political operative who runs a firm that has raised hundreds of millions of dollars for Democrats like Adam Schiff and Kamala Harris, and they raised that money by using my name and this very case in their fundraising emails. The judge's family was getting rich off the case he was presiding over. And he refused to recuse himself. It's a disgrace. On top of that, the judge himself had donated money, a small amount, but it doesn't matter, to Joe Biden's campaign. He hated me. You could see it in every ruling he made. He put a gag order on me, so I couldn't defend myself in public, but he let their witnesses like Michael Cohen and Stormy Daniels, another winner, go on television and say whatever they wanted about me. He sided with the prosecution on every single objection. He gave jury instructions that were so biased and so unconstitutional it was like he was telling the jury they had to convict me. The whole trial was a sham. It took place in the most heavily Democrat county in the entire country. It would have been impossible to get a fair jury. And they put me on trial for something that happened 8 years ago, something that wasn't a crime, based on the word of a convicted felon, in front of a conflicted judge whose family was making money off the case. This wasn't justice. This was a political show trial, orchestrated by Joe Biden's White House and the Democrat Party to interfere in the 2024 election. They even sent one of Biden's top former Justice Department officials to be part of the prosecution team. It was a Biden trial. They timed it to take me off the campaign trail for 6 weeks. They wanted that convicted felon headline. They thought it would hurt me. But like always, they were wrong. The American people, the smart ones, saw it for exactly what it was. A rigged, disgusting, un-American political persecution. And every time they attacked me in that courtroom, our poll numbers went up. Every lie they told, our campaign raised more money. They thought they could break us. Instead, they made us stronger than ever before. Chapter 19, the E. Jean Carroll hoax, a disgusting lie. Just when you thought the swamp couldn't sink any lower, they proved you wrong. While they were busy trying to put me in jail for bookkeeping and for having my own documents, another front in the lawfare war opened up. This one wasn't about politics, not directly. This one was personal. It was disgusting. And it was a total and complete lie. A woman named E. Jean Carroll, someone I have no idea who she is. I've never met her, never saw her, except on a picture line years ago with her husband, a nice guy. She came out of nowhere and made a crazy accusation. She claimed that sometime in the 1990s, 30 years ago, I did something to her in a dressing room at a fancy New York department store, Bergdorf Goodman. A very busy store. It's an insane story. First of all, she's not my type. Not at all. The whole story is a work of fiction. She couldn't remember the year, the month, the date. Her story changed over and over again. It was a ridiculous, disgusting lie from the very beginning. And where did this story come from? She first told it in a book she was trying to sell. She needed the publicity. But it was much worse than that. This wasn't just some crazy lady looking for attention. This was another political hit job, funded by the same people who are always behind these things. Her case was being paid for by a very rich left-wing Democrat billionaire, a guy named Reid Hoffman, who is a co-founder of LinkedIn. He hates me. He has given millions and millions of dollars to Democrats and to anti-Trump causes. So he decided to fund this phony lawsuit to try and damage me politically and personally. It was another form of election interference. So they took this 30-year-old, totally unproven, ridiculous story to a New York court. And just like in the Alvin Bragg case, they got a judge who was a horror show. His name was Lewis Kaplan. This judge was so hostile, so angry, so biased, you wouldn't believe it. He made rulings that were totally unfair. He wouldn't let my lawyers present key evidence. He wouldn't let them argue that the whole thing was politically motivated and funded by a Democrat billionaire. He basically told the jury that they had to believe her story. The whole thing was a rigged game from the start. They held 2 trials. In the first one, they found me liable for defamation because I told the truth, that I didn't know her and that her story was a hoax. In the second trial, they hit me with a ridiculous, insane judgment of over $80 million. For what? For telling the truth. For defending myself against a disgusting lie. And all of this happened in a New York City courtroom, where the jury pool is made up of people who voted against me by 90%. How can you get a fair trial? You can't. It's impossible. This case shows you how low they are willing to go. They couldn't beat me on policy. They couldn't beat me at the ballot box. So they decided to attack my character with the most vile and disgusting lies imaginable. They found a woman with a crazy story, they got a rich Democrat to pay for her lawyers, and they found a biased judge to railroad the case through the system. It is a disgrace to our country and to our justice system. They are trying to use the courts to silence people. They are trying to make it so that if you are a conservative, if you are a Republican, if you support me, you can be sued into oblivion based on lies, and you will have no recourse because the system is rigged against you. But the American people are smart. They see through it. They know these are political attacks. They know it's all part of the same witch hunt. They try to humiliate me. They try to bankrupt me. They try to destroy me. But I will never stop fighting. I will never surrender. And we will appeal this ridiculous verdict, and we will win. Because the truth is on our side. And in the end, the truth is all that matters. Part 6, the greatest comeback in history, because it had to be done. They threw everything at me. The hoaxes, the witch hunts, the impeachments, the rigged election, the indictments, the lies. More than any president, more than any human being in the history of our country has ever had to endure. They thought they could break me. They thought they could silence me. They thought if they hit me from enough sides, I would finally give up and go away. They were wrong. So wrong. Because they weren't just fighting me. They were fighting you. They were fighting the greatest political movement in the history of the world. And every time they attacked us, we didn't get weaker. We got stronger. Our resolve got harder. Our movement got bigger. This is the story of that strength. This is the story of the greatest comeback in American history. We had to do it because the survival of our country depended on it. Chapter 20, Truth, My Voice for the People. After they stole the 2020 election, the first thing the Swamp and their partners in big tech did was try to silence me. They thought if they could take away my voice, they could kill our movement. In a coordinated attack, they deplatformed me. Twitter, where I had almost 90 million followers and had changed the way presidents communicate, they banned me for life. Facebook, run by Mark Zuckerberg, who was spending hundreds of millions of dollars to take over local election offices with his Zuckerbucks, they banned me too. YouTube, Instagram, gone. They tried to erase me. They tried to make it so I could no longer speak directly to you, the American people. They wanted to put the fake news media back in charge of the narrative. They wanted to go back to the old days where they could lie about us, and we had no way to fight back. But we don't play by their rules. When they try to build a wall to keep us out, we build our own beautiful door. And that's exactly what we did. We decided that if they wouldn't let us use their broken down, left-wing platforms, we would build our own. A platform for us. A platform for truth. And so, Truth Social was born. It was a massive undertaking. Everyone said it couldn't be done. It's too hard, they said. You can't compete with Twitter and Facebook. They left, just like they left when I came down the escalator. And just like then, they were wrong. We built an incredible platform from scratch. With an incredible team led by a true patriot, Devin Nunes. We built it to be a refuge for free speech, a place where you can't be canceled for having an opinion that the radical left doesn't like. And it has been a tremendous success. A rocket ship. From the day we launched, the demand was so huge it almost broke the internet. Millions and millions of people signed up. It became my primary way of speaking to you. It's where I break the real news, where I expose the hoaxes, where I endorse great America First candidates, and where I talk directly to the people without the filter of the fake news. Truth Social is more than just a social media company. It's a movement. It's proof that we don't need them. We don't need their corrupt media. We don't need their biased tech companies. We have our own voice. And it is stronger and louder than ever before. They tried to silence me, and instead, they helped me create a media powerhouse that is driving them absolutely crazy. It was another one of their plans that backfired. Big league. Chapter 21, Crushing the Rhinos, the 2024 primary. With our voice back, stronger than ever on Truth Social, it was time to get back to work. The first step in taking back our country was to take back our party. The Republican Party had a choice to make. Would it be the party of the America First movement, the party of the people? Or would it go back to being the party of the losers, the globalists, and the rhinos like Paul Ryan, Mitt Romney, and the Bush family? The swamp and the donor class were desperate to get rid of me. They thought after the 2020 steal on January 6th, they finally had their chance to put their puppets back in charge. They spent hundreds of millions of dollars trying to find a candidate, any candidate, who could stop our movement. First, they put all their hopes in the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, or as I call him, Ron DeSanctimonious. Here's a guy who would be working in a pizza parlor or a law office right now if it weren't for me. He was dead in his race for governor. He was losing big. He came to me, he begged me for my endorsement. He was crying. I gave it to him, I held massive rallies for him, and he won. And how did he repay me? With disloyalty. He got a little bit of praise from the fake news, and his head got big. He thought he could be the new guy. He and his donors spent a fortune, almost $200 million, trying to take me on. And what happened? It was one of the worst, most embarrassing campaigns in the history of politics. He was awkward. He had no personality. He didn't know how to talk to people. We crushed him. We beat him so badly in Iowa, the first state, that he had to drop out of the race before it even really began. A total flameout. Then you had Nikki Birdbrain Haley. Another one who I gave a big job to. I made her ambassador to the United Nations. She was great when she worked for me. But then the donors got to her. The warmongers, the people who want to send our kids to die in endless foreign wars, they saw her as their last hope. They poured tens of millions of dollars into her campaign. She ran around saying nasty things, lying about my record. She was the darling of the fake news and the Democrats for about 5 minutes. We beat her in every single state. Every one. We set a record. We won the Iowa caucuses by the biggest margin in history. We won New Hampshire. We won South Carolina, her own home state, where she was governor, and we didn't just beat her, we embarrassed her. It was a total wipeout. She stayed in the race way too long, propped up by Democrat money, but in the end, she had to face the facts. The people didn't want her. They didn't want the old Republican Party of yesterday. It wasn't even a contest. The 2024 Republican primary was the fastest, most dominant victory in the history of primary politics. We won almost every single delegate. It was a total repudiation of the rhinos. It was the American people, the Republican voters, rising up and saying with one loud, clear voice, "This is our party now. This is Donald Trump's party. This is the MAGA party." The rhinos were crushed. The donors lost all their money. The swamp was defeated. We had united the party behind our America First agenda. The message was sent. Now, with a unified, powerful party behind us, it was time to take on the real enemy, the corrupt, failed, and senile disaster known as Joe Biden. Chapter 22, The Crooked Biden Record, a Disaster for America. With the rhinos crushed and the party unified behind our incredible America First movement, it was time to turn our full attention to the main event, the disaster known as the crooked Joe Biden administration. You don't even need me to tell you how bad it is. You feel it every single day. Just look around. Look at your grocery bills. Look at the gas pump. Look at the news. Ask yourself one simple question, the one that really matters. Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago, under my administration? The answer is no. A resounding, thundering no. For almost everyone in this country, unless you're an illegal alien or a member of the Biden crime family, the answer is no. For 4 years, under our leadership, you had the greatest economy in the history of the world. It wasn't just numbers on a page, it was real. We had the lowest unemployment ever recorded for African Americans, Hispanic Americans, and Asian Americans. More people were working than ever before. We had low inflation, so low it was basically zero. Gas was cheap, I saw it for $1.87 a gallon. Your 401k was soaring. We passed the biggest tax cuts and regulation cuts in American history, and it unleashed a boom like nobody had ever seen. We brought jobs back from China. We became a net exporter of energy for the first time ever. We were energy independent. Our country was strong, proud, and booming. And then Joe Biden came in. And with a nasty pen and a lot of very stupid, radical ideas, he managed to create a catastrophe. It's a calamity. A total wreck. It's like he took a beautiful, high-performance race car and drove it straight into a brick wall on purpose. First, look at your wallet. He came in and immediately declared war on American energy. He shut down the Keystone XL pipeline on day one, killing thousands of great union jobs. He stopped drilling in Alaska. He stopped new leases. He did everything he could to crush the lifeblood of our country. And what happened? Gas prices went through the roof. You see it every time you go to the pump. It's a punch in the gut. And when gas prices go up, the price of everything goes up. It's called inflation. And inflation is a vicious tax on everyone, but it hurts the poor and the middle class the most. Your grocery bills are a nightmare. The price of eggs, milk, bacon, it's insane. They try to call this disaster Bidenomics. It's a joke. It's Bidenflation, and it is robbing you and your family blind while he tells you everything is great. Then, look at our southern border. I gave him the most secure border in the history of our country. It took a lot of work. They fought me every step of the way. But we built almost 500 miles of a beautiful, powerful wall. We had Remain in Mexico, a great policy where people had to wait in Mexico, not in our country. We had Title 42. We had ended the disaster of catch and release. We stopped the flow. And what did he do? On day one, he ripped it all up. He took a wrecking ball to everything we had built. He deliberately and maliciously opened our border to the entire world. It's not a border crisis, it's an invasion. At least 15 million illegal aliens have been allowed to pour into our country. We have no idea who they are. They are coming from prisons. They are coming from mental institutions. They are terrorists from the Middle East, military-aged men from China. They are bringing crime. They are bringing drugs. Fentanyl is pouring across our border, made in China and brought in by the cartels, and it is poisoning our children and our communities at a rate nobody has ever seen. Every town is now a border town. Joe Biden did that. He is responsible for every single bit of it. It's the worst border any country has ever had, anywhere in the world, at any time. And what about our standing in the world? Under me, we were respected. Seared, actually. I got us out of the horrible Iran nuclear deal. I obliterated the ISIS caliphate in a matter of weeks. I stood up to China like no president ever has. I moved our embassy to Jerusalem, something other presidents promised for decades but were too weak to do. We had peace deals in the Middle East, the Abraham Accords, that nobody thought were possible. For 4 years, we started no new wars. We projected peace through strength. Under Joe Biden, we are a laughingstock. The world is on fire because our enemies see that America is led by a fool. It started with his surrender in Afghanistan. The most embarrassing and humiliating moment in the history of the United States. He abandoned Americans behind enemy lines. He left behind $85 billion of the best military equipment in the world. We all saw the horrible pictures of people clinging to airplanes. He gave a victory to the terrorists. And our enemies saw it. They saw our weakness. And what happened? Russia invaded Ukraine. The war in Israel started because Iran, flush with cash from Biden, funded their Hamas proxies. China is threatening Taiwan. The world is a much more dangerous place because they know the man in the White House is weak. And at the center of it all is a man who is not all there. You see it. Everyone sees it, and they pretend not to. He shakes hands with thin air. He gets lost walking off a stage. You see the Easter Bunny have to guide him. He falls up the stairs of Air Force One. He falls off a bicycle that was standing still. He mumbles and whispers into the microphone. He tells these crazy stories about how he faced down a gangster named Corn Pop, a bad dude. Stories that never happened. The man is not competent to be president. He is cognitively impaired. The special counsel in his own documents case said he couldn't be charged because he was a well-meaning, elderly man with a poor memory. He's too senile to stand trial, but he has the nuclear codes. It's a walking national security threat. Who is really running the country? Is it the radical leftists on his staff? Is it Barack Obama pulling the strings from behind the scenes? We don't know. But we know it's not Sleepy Joe. He's just an empty suit, a vessel for a radical, socialist agenda that is running our country into the ground. This is what was at stake. We couldn't let this continue. We had to come back. We had to rescue our country from the clutches of these failures. We had to make America great again. And that is exactly what we did. And let's be honest, you see it every day. You don't need a political expert to tell you. The man is not all there. He's not playing with a full deck. He shuffles around the White House lawn like a zombie, looking lost. They have to lead him by the hand. The Easter Bunny. The Easter Bunny had to direct the President of the United States where to go. It's a national embarrassment. Our enemies are watching this. Do you think President Xi of China is afraid of a man who gets bossed around by a person in a bunny costume? Do you think Putin is worried about a man who can't find his way off a stage that only has one exit? It's a joke. He goes on vacation more than any president in history. Every time there's a crisis, he's on the beach in Delaware. You see the pictures of him, sitting in a beach chair, looking confused. While the world burns, while our country is being invaded, while your bank account is being drained, he's on vacation. They have to call a lid on his day at 9 o'clock in the morning. He can't handle the job. It's elder abuse, what they're doing to him, but it's also abuse of our country. And while he's destroying our country, what's his family doing? They're getting rich. It's the Biden crime family. It's an enterprise. You have his son, Hunter, a guy who got thrown out of the Navy, who knows nothing about art but sells his terrible paintings for $500,000 to anonymous buyers. Who knows nothing about energy, but was getting millions and millions of dollars from a corrupt Ukrainian gas company, Burisma. For what? For his expertise? He has no expertise. He was selling access. He was selling the brand. And the brand is Joe Biden. He's the big guy. Remember that? 10% for the big guy. It's all on the laptop from hell, the one that 51 corrupt intelligence officials, all liars, said was Russian disinformation right before the 2020 election. They lied to you. They interfered in our election to hide the truth. And the truth is that the Biden family was taking money from China, from Ukraine, from Romania, from everywhere. Joe Biden is a compromised president. He is owned by China. He is a Manchurian candidate. It explains everything. It explains why he's weak on China. It explains why he's letting them run circles around us. He's paid for. He lies about everything. Constantly. He lied about his grades in school. He lied about being a truck driver. He lied and said he was arrested trying to see Nelson Mandela. A total lie. He said his house burned down with his wife in it. Another lie. He is a pathological liar. And the fake news media, they just let him get away with it. They cover for him. They protect him. If I told 1/10 of the lies he tells, they would be calling for my impeachment every single day. But for him, they just say, "Oh, that's just Joe." It's a disgrace. And it's not just the economy or the border or the weakness. They are waging a war on our values. A war on our children. They push this woke garbage in our schools. They want to teach our kids that America is an evil, racist country. They sick the FBI on parents, terrorists, they call them, for having the courage to go to a school board meeting and complain about what they are teaching. They're trying to destroy women's sports by letting men compete. They've turned our beautiful military, the greatest fighting force in the history of the world, into a woke social experiment, worrying about pronouns and climate change instead of worrying about winning wars. It's sick. It's wrong. And we are going to end it on day one. This is what we were up against. A failed president who is cognitively impaired. A corrupt family that has sold our country out to our enemies. A radical, socialist agenda that is destroying our economy, erasing our borders, and waging war on our most cherished values. This wasn't just a bad presidency, it was an assault on the very idea of America. We didn't have a choice. We couldn't let this continue for one more day than was necessary. We had to come back. We had to fight back. We had to rescue our country from the clutches of these failures, these socialists, these globalists who were running it into the ground. We had to make America great again, again. The man, Sleepy Joe, is a walking disaster, but he's also a comedy show. A very sad, very pathetic comedy show that is ruining our country. You have a guy who falls off a bicycle that is standing still. Can you believe it? The bike wasn't even moving. I said, that bike is going to run for president. It's more popular than he is. The Secret Service had to run over and untangle him from his own feet. Then you have the stairs. He can't get up the stairs to Air Force One without falling. He falls up. Who falls up? It's like he's in a fight with gravity, and gravity is winning, big league. And the teleprompter. The man is a slave to the teleprompter, and he's not even good at that. He reads whatever they put in front of him. He'll say something, and then he'll actually say the instructions out loud. He'll say, "End of quote." Repeat the line. He actually says that. The man is a living, breathing meme. A meme of disaster. They have to make the font size so big, it's like for a kindergartner. Each word is the size of a billboard. And he still messes it up. His biggest decision of the day is 1 scoop or 2. Chocolate chip or vanilla. While China is building aircraft carriers, while Russia is on the march, our president is in a deep, serious negotiation with the person behind the ice cream counter. You see the pictures. He looks so happy with his little ice cream cone. It's the only time he looks like he knows what's going on. He should be focused on the border, on inflation, on the world blowing up, but instead, he's worried about brain freeze. And the whispering. What is that all about? He leans into the microphone like he's telling you a very, very important secret, and he starts whispering. I'm going to get you more taxes. He whispers. Nobody knows what he's doing. Is it for effect? Does he think the microphone is too loud? Is he trying to sound tough? He sounds like a crazy person. I'm waiting for the day he leans in and whispers, I see dead people. Honestly, would it surprise anyone? And the beach. The man is always on the beach. He's got more beach days than a retired surfer. There's a crisis in the Middle East. He's on the beach. The border is being overrun. He's on the beach. Inflation is crushing families. He's on the beach in his chair, with his hat on, looking out at the ocean. What is he looking at? We don't know. Maybe he's waiting for a message from a dolphin. His handlers, and they are handlers, like for a child, they have to come and get him. You see them. This way, Joe. No, not into the water, Joe. The White House is that way. They have to surround him with people to make sure he doesn't wander off. And sometimes they still fail. The Easter Bunny. I will never forget it. The President of the United States was trying to talk about Afghanistan or something very serious, and a person in a giant bunny suit came over and pulled him away. The Easter Bunny is making foreign policy now. Can you imagine what President Xi or Putin thinks when they see that? They're not laughing with us, they're laughing at us. They see America being led by a man who takes orders from a giant rabbit. This is the man they try to tell you is a great leader. This is the man they indicted me to try and help. They knew he couldn't win on his own. He can't even win a debate with himself. He loses every time. So they had to cheat in 2020, and they had to use lawfare in 2024. Because they know that a man who is afraid of stairs, who gets confused by ice cream, and who needs an Easter bunny for a bodyguard has no chance against our movement. This is what was at stake. We couldn't let this joke, this sad, pathetic joke, continue. We had to come back. We had to rescue our country from the clutches of these failures. We had to make America great again, again. And that is exactly what we did. Chapter 23, Vindication, November 5, 2024. And so we came to the day of reckoning. November 5, 2024. The most important election day in the history of our country, maybe in the history of the world. The stakes could not have been higher. It was a choice between strength and weakness. It was a choice between prosperity and poverty. It was a choice between sanity and madness. It was a choice between making America great again and watching the final, pathetic decline of the greatest nation God has ever created. The swamp threw everything they had at us. They had their indictments. They had their show trials. They had the fake news media, who were more vicious and more dishonest than ever before. They had big tech censoring the truth. They had Hollywood celebrities making their stupid videos. They had the entire corrupt establishment, from both parties, united against us. But we had something they didn't have. We had you. We had the American people. And on that beautiful Tuesday in November, the American people spoke. And it wasn't just a whisper. It wasn't just a voice. It was a roar. It was a roar that was heard from the rocky coasts of Maine to the beautiful beaches of California. It was the great American silent majority, silent no more, rising up to take their country back. This time, we were ready for their tricks. We had the lawyers. We had the poll watchers. We had patriots in every polling place, in every counting center. We had an army of people, maga-gators, watching every move they made. They tried to cheat again. We know they did. There were still shenanigans in Philadelphia and Detroit. But this time, our movement was so big, so powerful, so overwhelming, that they couldn't steal enough votes to make a difference. We swamped them. It was a red wave like nobody has ever seen before. The night started, and you could feel it. The energy was incredible. First, Florida came in. A massive, historic landslide. We didn't just win, we won by a margin so big it was a political earthquake. Then Ohio. A total blowout. Then Texas. Then the great state of Iowa. The map started turning red, a beautiful, powerful red, just like in 2016, but even bigger. The fake news anchors on CNN and MSNBC, you could see the panic in their eyes again. They looked like they had seen a ghost. Their faces were long. They were sad. They were trying to find some path for Biden, some combination of votes that didn't exist. They couldn't believe it was happening again. We won North Carolina. We won Georgia. This time, they couldn't steal it. We won Arizona. And then came the moment that shattered their world. We won the blue wall, but we did more than that. We won Pennsylvania by a lot. We won Michigan. We won Wisconsin. The very states they stole from us in 2020 came roaring back home. We even won states that nobody thought was possible. We won Virginia. We won Minnesota. We won New Mexico. The map was a sea of red. It was a landslide of epic proportions. A total repudiation of Joe Biden and his radical, socialist agenda. It was a complete rejection of the weaponized Department of Justice, of the witch hunts, of the indictments, of the hoaxes. The American people said, enough. It was vindication. Total and complete vindication. For me, for my family, for every person who worked on our campaign, for every patriot who was persecuted and prosecuted, and most of all, for you. It was vindication for every person who was ever called a deplorable. For every person who was ever looked down on by the swamp. For every person who knew in their heart that our country was headed in the wrong direction. They threw everything at us. They broke every rule. They shattered every norm. They tried to put their political opponent in jail. And the American people saw it for what it was and delivered a righteous and thunderous verdict. The celebration that night was a beautiful thing. All across the country, people were cheering. They were waving their flags. They were proud of their country again. Hope was restored. We didn't just win an election. We saved our country. And now, the real work could begin. Chapter 24, Day 1, Retribution and Rebirth. The victory on November 5th was not the end. It was the beginning. It was the moment the American people gave us our mandate. They didn't just vote for me to go back to the White House and play nice with the people who tried to destroy our country. They didn't vote for us to reach across the aisle to the very same liars and cheats who called them deplorable and tried to cancel their vote. No. They voted for us to finish the job. And on January 20th, 2025, when I place my hand on the Bible and take that sacred oath for the second time, the Washington swamp is going to feel an earthquake like it has never felt before. The games are over. The old ways are done. The era of the failed, corrupt, globalist establishment is coming to a very swift and decisive end. Day 1 will be a reckoning. Our first act will be to seal the border. Not just talk about it. Seal it. We will sign the executive orders to immediately halt the invasion. We will reinstate every single one of my successful border policies, from Remain in Mexico to Title 42. And we will begin the largest domestic deportation operation in American history. We have to. A country without borders is not a country. The illegal aliens who Joe Biden has waved into our country are going home. On day 1, we will unleash the power of American energy. We will drill, baby, drill. We will approve the pipelines. We will end the war on American oil and gas. We will bring down your gas prices and your electricity bills, and we will bring back energy independence so we are no longer begging foreign dictators for oil. On day 1, we will begin the process of dismantling the deep state. We have a plan. We will fire the corrupt, unelected bureaucrats who have been weaponizing our government against the American people. We will use Schedule F to remove the bad actors from the FBI, the DOJ, the State Department, and the intelligence agencies. We are going to drain the swamp, for real this time. And yes, there will be retribution. Not as revenge, but for justice. We will appoint a real special counsel, a true special counsel, to investigate the crimes of the Biden crime family and the crooked officials who illegally spied on my campaign and interfered in not one, but 2 elections. We are going to hold them accountable. The 2-tiered system of justice will be obliterated. There will be one standard of justice for all Americans. The people who committed these crimes against our country must not get away with it. They have to be held to account. This is not just about punishing the wicked. It is about a national rebirth. We will end the ridiculous and costly wars overseas and bring our troops home. We will stop sending hundreds of billions of your dollars to other countries and start rebuilding our own country. We will rebuild our cities, our roads, our bridges. We will take back our schools from the radical left Marxists. We will get critical race theory and gender ideology out of the classroom. We will protect women's sports. We will empower parents. We will teach our children to love their country, not to be ashamed of it. We will stand up for our law enforcement officers and give them the power and respect they need to restore law and order to our streets. We will bring back peace and safety to our communities. This is my pledge to you. This is our mission. The last 8 years have been a battle for the soul of our nation. We have been through the fire. We have been tested like never before. But we never broke. We never bent. We never surrendered. And now, we have been given a historic opportunity to not just fix what they broke, but to build a country that is stronger, prouder, and more prosperous than ever before. The fake news will scream. The globalists will cry. The swamp will fight back with everything they have left. But it won't matter. Because this time, we know who they are. We know all their tricks. And we have the one thing that they can never take away from us, the unwavering support of the greatest people on earth. The best is yet to come. We will finish what we started. And together, we will make America great again. Greater than ever before. Believe me. A final truth. They threw everything at me. More than any president, more than any person, in the history of our country. The Russia hoax. The phony dossier. The Mueller witch hunt. The impeachment scams. The spying. The lying. The rigged election. The boxes hoax. The raids. The show trials. The indictments. Every single day for 8 years, they tried to stop me. They tried to break me. They tried to destroy me and my family. They tried to put me in jail. But what they never understood is that they weren't just coming after me. They were coming after you. They were coming after your values. They were coming after your faith. They were coming after your family. They were coming after your vote. They were coming after your freedom. And I was just the one person standing in their way. I was proud to do it. It was my honor to fight for you. And look what happened. After all of it, after the tens of millions of dollars, after the thousands of fake news headlines, after all the lies and all the illegal attacks, here we are. Still standing. Still fighting. And not just standing, but standing taller and stronger than ever before. Our movement is more powerful than it has ever been. Our resolve has never been greater. They threw everything they had at us, and we won. We won a great victory for America. Because we have something they don't have. We have something they will never understand. We have the truth. And the truth, it's a powerful thing. It's the most powerful thing of all. They tried to bury the truth. They tried to censor it. They tried to call it a lie. But the truth is still the truth. And now, the truth is winning. The best is yet to come. Believe me.